Hello everyone, welcome to PW English YouTube channel. I'm Shalini Somashekhar, your botany teacher. In today's lecture in the UMEED NEET English batch, we are going to be discussing the chapter Morphology of Flowering Plants. I'm sure you're already aware in this batch we're discussing each chapter in absolute detail in just one shot, which is exactly what we will be doing today as well. And before we start off with the discussion of the concepts, I want to give you an overview of how many questions you can expect from this chapter in NEET 2025. If you look at the analysis of the number of questions that have appeared from this chapter over the past few years, you can see how on an average you can expect around 3 to 5 questions from this chapter. Very rarely just 1 or 2 questions have been asked. Talking about the kind of questions that appear from this chapter, it's mostly almost always memory based. So in this chapter you have to learn about a couple of concepts that are pretty easy to understand and follow, but it is difficult to remember because there's a lot of scientific names, lots of examples, and most of the questions from this chapter are example based. So after you've understood the whole chapter, it requires a lot of frequent revisions because that is what will help retain what you've studied in your brain for a longer period. So this is one of those chapters that are easy breezy to understand but very difficult to remember. So yeah, and talking about the syllabus, if you look at the old NCERT and compare it with the new NCERT and compare it with the NEET 2025 syllabus, this is a snip from the NTA syllabus like I always show. So over here you can see how morphology and modifications is included. If you look at the old NCERT textbook, it has modifications, root, stem, leaf modifications and all of that. But in your new NCERT, the modification part is deleted. So for this chapter, it would be ideal if you can refer the old NCERT textbook. Okay, so we have morphology, modifications, anatomy and tissues we learn in the next chapter. We have to learn about the morphology and modifications in root, stem, leaf, types of inflorescence, flower, fruit, seed, basically all of that. Okay, and also at the end of the chapter we're going to learn about the characteristic features of some angiosperm families like Malvaceae, Cruciferae, Leguminosae, Compositae and Graminae. Malvaceae is not part of your old or new syllabus. Cruciferae is another name for Brassicaceae. We would briefly learn about Brassicaceae because it is given in the old NCERT for as an example for your floral diagram and floral formula. So very briefly we would learn about it, but we have to learn about it in more detail now. So this is entirely out of NCERT. This is not there in NCERT. This is not there in NCERT. Leguminosae is nothing but our Fabaceae family, which was there in the old NCERT textbook. Compositae is nothing but Asteraceae family. This is not there in NCERT. Graminae is nothing but our grass family, which is Poaceae. Okay. So the characteristic features of all of these 5 families you have to learn. In the old NCERT, you had Liliaceae and Solanaceae, which is not there in your NEET syllabus. So this can be skipped. Okay. So Fabaceae was there. This is there in old NCERT. All of these, Malvaceae, Brassicaceae, Asteraceae, Poaceae, it's not there in either old NCERT or new NCERT. So whatever relevant information, characteristic features are required, I will teach that myself. You will get the notes for it along with the notes here in the form of the same slides. You will get notes, so you can download that from our app. Okay. So with that, let's get started with the chapter Morphology of Flowering Plants. So what does morphology mean? Of course, if you remember, I told you that when we spoke about plant kingdom, I mentioned how angiosperms are the most advanced group of plants. They are the most abundant, dominant type of plants that we see today on the earth, right? I mentioned that we will not study in detail about angiosperms in plant kingdom. We will learn more about it in 3 different chapters. This is one of those chapters. In this chapter, we are going to learn exclusively about the morphology of flowering plants. What are flowering plants? Flowering plants are nothing but angiosperms. Okay. So in this chapter, we are going to learn about its morphology. What does morphology mean? Morphology is a branch of biology. Morphology is derived from 2 words, morphe and logos or logy. Morphe means shape or form. Logos or logy means study of something. You know, zoology, geology, biology. Logy is the study of something. So here it is the study of size or form or shape or whatever. Basically, you can say that you're learning about the external features of an organism. You're not cutting it down, looking at what kind of tissues are present inside. You're just learning about its external morphological features. That deals with the study of shape, form and structure. Okay, that is morphology. Here we're studying about morphology of flowering plants. So we will study about the shape, size, structure, form of root, stem, leaves, flower, fruits, seeds, what are the variations you can see in nature and all of those things. Okay, it's an interesting chapter, but students like really dread this chapter because there's a lot of examples, but we'll get through it. Don't worry. All right. You know, the different parts of a plant, you've been learning about it ever since you were probably in 3rd grade. I'm sure everybody already knows about the parts of a plant. We'll start off with the root. Here you have the root. Below the ground, generally in most cases, what you have above the ground is the stem. The stem has many different branches, and on the branches you can find leaves, which are the photosynthetic parts of the plant. Then you have flower, right? Flower after sexual reproduction will transform into the fruit. And within the fruit, you can find the presence of seeds. So these are the 6 different parts of a plant that you are aware of. We are going to learn about the morphology of each of these parts in detail. Okay, so we are going to go in the exact same order. First we learn about the root, then the stem and its part, leaf and its parts, different variations. Then we have flower, then we have fruit, and ultimately we will learn about seed. Okay, so we will learn about all of these parts in this order, starting with the root. As you already know, root, stem and leaves are called the vegetative parts of the plant. Flower, fruit and seed, they are called the reproductive parts of a plant, right? They are involved in reproduction and continuation of generation. So these are called the reproductive parts. Okay, we will first learn about the vegetative parts and then we'll move on to learn about the reproductive parts. Let's start with the root. How does the root system form? How does a plant begin its life cycle? A plant's life cycle begins in the form of a seed. When the seed is planted in the soil, it will germinate. And when it germinates, you have a new tiny little plant which has its own tiny little root system and a tiny shoot system, right? So within the seed was a tiny baby plant already present that will germinate, come outside and give rise to a new plant. What is present inside the seed that can give rise to a new plant? Within the seed, there is a baby plant that is sitting. We call that the embryo. In the embryo, you will already have parts that are destined to become the future root and shoot. So if you look at the embryo of the seed, there is a specific part called the radicle. In the radicle of the embryo, that is what, when the seed germinates, will give rise to the root system. Are you following what I'm saying? So this is the seed, right? Within the seed, what do we have? We have what is called an embryo. More about the structure of embryo, what are its different parts, we'll study later. For now, what you need to understand, just that much I'm telling you. A part of this embryo is called the radicle. Now, when this seed germinates, the radical part of the embryo will give rise to the root system. So remember, R for radical, R for root. Roots develop from the radical, whereas that radical is part of the embryo present within the seed. Okay? Generally, in majority of the cases, roots are underground, right? They're produced below the soil. There are a few exceptions. That's why I'm saying generally they are underground. Which are those exceptions? We'll learn about that later. Okay? And also, roots are not photosynthetic in most cases because they are non-green. They do not possess chlorophyll required for photosynthesis, so they are non-green. What is the function of the roots then? Roots have two primary functions to perform. Firstly, it will help in anchoring the plant firmly to the soil. Secondly, it will help in absorption of water and minerals that the plant requires for its growth from the soil. Okay, so it has two jobs. One is absorption, the other one is anchorage. Okay, so these are called the primary functions of the root. Okay, so in NCERT, however, they have also mentioned storing reserve food, synthesis of plant growth regulators. Of course, synthesis of plant growth regulators, some roots at the tip of roots, some PGRs, plant growth hormones or phytohormones are synthesized, but the primary function of roots is to anchor the plant firmly to the soil and also help in absorption. In some plants, the root is swollen and stores food, such as in carrot and radish and turnip and all of those plants, but that is a modification. That is not its primary function, that is a modification. Okay. Now, we'll talk about the different types of root systems. We have three different types of root systems: a taproot system, a fibrous root system, and adventitious root system. Taproot system and fibrous root system, both of these, either of these will absolutely be present in a plant. Okay. In addition to either taproot or fibrous root system, in some species you can see adventitious root system as well. Okay, so we learn about the differences between these three types of root systems, starting with the taproot system. Taproot system can be seen in dicot plants such as mustard. What basically happens here is, in the embryo you have the radicle, right? Let's say this is the radicle. This radicle will elongate, and because of the direct elongation of radicle, a root forms. This is called the primary root. Now, this primary root will develop branches on the side. You call these the lateral branches because they are arising from the side. You call them lateral branch. If this is the primary root, the branch that forms directly from it, this is the secondary root. The branch that forms from the secondary root is the tertiary root. Like this, a lot of branches will form. You can see that here, right? So, such a type of root system is called taproot system. So, here you have the main root, which is called the taproot, primary root, and then these branches that arise from the side, these are called lateral roots. Okay. So, in these type of plants which have a taproot system, you can see how primary root is the thickest. As it starts branching and giving out secondary, tertiary roots, the diameter or the thickness of those lateral roots will go on reducing. You can make that out in this diagram right here. You can see how at the center it is the thickest and then the branches are thinner and thinner. Okay. So, this is a characteristic feature of dicots. Here is the first example for the day. Example is mustard. Now, what is fibrous root system? Fibrous root system initially also is derived from the radicle itself. It also arises from the radicle itself. So, the radicle that is there in the embryo, okay, so the radicle that is there will elongate, give rise to a primary root. But this primary root is ephemeral or it is short-lived. Okay, so very soon it will die. What happens then is, from the base of the stem, roots will start arising, highly branched roots. It will start arising like a tuft. This type of root system is called fibrous root system. In fibrous root system, if you look at the different branches, they are pretty much of the same diameter, not much difference as in the case of taproot. Where do you see such fibrous roots? You can see that in monocots like wheat plant. This is our second example. Okay, over here, the important point is that the primary root is formed from the radicle, but it is short-lived. Now, when you talk about adventitious root, the difference here between taproot, fibrous root and adventitious root is that adventitious roots don't form from the radicle at all. Remember I told you that generally they form from the radicle. There are exceptions, I told you that in the beginning. So over here they don't form from the radicle at all. They form from other parts other than the radicle. They could form from some part of the stem. They could form from a leaf. So if they're forming from any part other than the radicle, then you call it adventitious root. A plant cannot only exclusively have just adventitious root. If it is a dicot plant, it will have a taproot, along with that adventitious root will be present. If it's a monocot plant, it will have fibrous root, along with that adventitious root may be present. It doesn't happen ever that a plant has only adventitious root and no taproot or fibrous root. Okay. So in addition to either taproot or fibrous root, you will have adventitious roots. So the important point here is that these roots are formed from parts other than the radicle. Where can you see them? You can see them in plants like monstera and banyan tree. I'm sure all of you have seen monstera, right? Monstera has very nice, pretty big leaves. You see a lot of roots arising from this plant that have not formed from the radicle. Of course, banyan tree, every one of you must have seen. You see how from the branches, very long roots arise, right? So, adventitious roots arise from the stem in banyan tree as well. So, these are the three different types of root systems. Alright, now let's talk about the different regions of a root. Here what you're looking at is a taproot. Let's take one section of the taproot and enlarge it. Over here at the tip of the root, you can find many different types of regions or zones. Okay, we will learn about what are those different zones that you can see at the tip of a root. Okay, so we will start with the apex. This is called the tip of the root. This side is called the tip of the root or the apex. And this is called the base of the root. The tip of the root is very, very important because at the tip, a lot of cells are present. We call them meristematic cells. And these cells are involved in helping the growth of the root. If the plant is growing, the stem is growing, of course the root also has to grow deeper into the soil because it will need more water to support that big plant, right? So it will have to go and penetrate into the soil particles and grow deeper in the soil. At the tip is where meristematic cells are present. What are these meristematic cells doing? They are constantly dividing. One cell becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, like that they are increasing in number and contributing to the growth or increase in length of the root. As they are increasing in length and causing the plant root to grow, they will have to go through these soil particles which can generate a lot of friction and damage the tip of the root which is carrying such precious tissue responsible for growth, right? So that kind of tissue which has the ability to undergo cell division, which can contribute to the growth of the plant, has to be well protected. So at the tip, you have a protective cap-like structure called the root cap. Now this root cap, according to NCERT, is called a thimble-like structure. What is a thimble? Thimble is a metallic, cap-like thing that sewers use, like tailors use when they're trying to sew something or stitch something. In order to protect the tip of their fingers by constant piercing of the needle, they have this protective thing that is kind of like a cap. So here they say that the tip of the root has a root cap. Basically its job is to protect the meristematic tissue that lies above it. Okay, so right above the root cap, or according to NCERT, the word proximal is used. Proximal means close, like immediately after. So right proximal to the root cap, you have the region of meristematic activity. I already told you what the region of meristematic activity does. Over here, you have meristematic cells. Okay, so these meristematic cells have the ability to undergo cell division. They can divide. Not all plant cells have the ability, only meristematic cells have the ability to undergo cell division. So the cells here are constantly dividing and they are very small in size. They have thin walls, a dense cytoplasm and a prominent nucleus. Okay, So the cells in this region are very, very important because they are contributing to the growth of the root. If the root has to grow deeper into the soil, these cells are dividing, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, like that they keep on increasing in number and contribute to the growth of the root. Now, right proximal to the region of maturation or above the region of maturation, you have the region of elongation. Over here, what happens is, some of these meristematic cells, let's say there are 100 meristematic cells, of them one subset of meristematic cells, let's say 50, not exactly, I'm just giving you random numbers just so you understand. So one subset of these meristematic cells will stop dividing, they will stop undergoing cell division, while the other 50 will continue to divide. What will happen to the cells that lose the cell division capacity? They will start increasing in size now. I mentioned how the meristematic cells are small in size. Now what happens in the region of elongation is the cells that were like this will start increasing in size in the longitudinal axis, in this axis, and they will start increasing in length. You know, any organ or any part of the body can grow when there is increase in the number of cells or when there is increase in the size of cells. If 100 cells remained 100 cells and they increased in size, even then growth will happen. If 100 cells became 200 cells, then also growth will happen. Over here in the region of meristematic activity, growth is happening because there is an increase in the cell number. In region of elongation, growth is happening because there is an increase in the cell size. Both of these are contributing to the increase in length of the root. Okay. Now, right above this region of elongation, what happens is, some of the cells in the region of elongation, they will stop increasing any further in size. You cannot expect to keep increasing in length forever. So at one point it will attain its maximal size, how much ever maximally a cell can attain, it will attain the maximal size. At that point it will decide and take up some permanent function in the plant. Then we say the cell or tissue has become differentiated or mature. So right above this zone of elongation or region of elongation, you have what we call the region of maturation. Over here you have permanent tissues like parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, xylem, phloem. You no longer have cells that are dividing, you no longer have cells that are growing and increasing in size. They have become mature, they have taken up particular functions inside the plant and they have become differentiated. Okay, so over here you will mostly find permanent tissues. Remember, one of the most important functions of the root is to help in absorption of water and minerals from its surroundings, right? Of course, root is branched, there is a great surface area that helps in absorption of water and minerals. But in order to increase even more the surface area available for absorption, what basically happens is, at the surface, whatever cells are present in the region of maturation, at the surface, whatever cell layer is there, from that cell layer, some cells, not all of them, some of them will extend out like this to form what we call the root hair. What does root hair do? Root hair increases surface area. Why should surface area increase? That will make absorption even better, right? So this helps in increasing the surface area that's available for absorption of water and minerals. Okay, so these are the different regions of the root. You should know in order from the tip to base what are the different regions. From the base to tip, different questions are asked, then you should know. At the tip, you have the root cap. It is protective in function. It is thimble shaped. It is protecting the region of meristematic activity, above which you have the region of elongation. And then you have the region of maturation. Within the region of maturation, you have the region of root hair, or the root hair are present arising from some superficial cells from the region of maturation. Okay, so that's about the different regions of the root. Now let's talk about modifications of root. What does root modification mean? In general, we are going to learn about modification of root, stem and leaves. Modification is when a plant part does something unusual. Okay, primary function of the root is to help anchor the plant and help in absorption and probably produce plant growth regulators. If a root is involved in any function other than these, then you call it a modification. Okay, so roots in some plants, they change their shape and structure and they perform some other function other than their primary functions, which is anchorage and absorption. In such cases, we call it root modification. we say that the roots of such plants are modified. Okay, so for what reasons can roots be modified? They may be modified in order to store food, as in the case of carrot, like I mentioned earlier. They might provide support, they might help in respiration. So for all of these reasons, roots can become modified. We'll understand each of these one by one, starting with storage. For storage, you have carrot, turnip and sweet potato. These are the examples. Okay, carrot and turnip and even radish, both of these are taproot modifications. Taproots have swollen, stored a lot of reserve food material. It's storing a lot of food and it has become larger in size comparatively. Over here, root is modified for storage. Same thing for sweet potato. Sweet potato is an adventitious root modification where adventitious root swells up by storing a lot of food and becomes modified. Okay, sweet potato is a root modification, adventitious root modification. The potato that we use for French fries, that potato is a stem modification. We learn about it later. This is one point where students get confused. Remember that the root modification is sweet potato. It is an adventitious root modification modified to, store food, but sweet potato is a stem modified to store food. I'm sorry, potato is a stem modified to store food. Okay. Now, that's about storage. Now, let's talk about support. Banyan tree. Everybody has seen a banyan tree. It's characterized by the roots that are hanging down from the top of the tree. If this is the tree, it will have a lot of branches, right? And it will have a huge canopy. Generally, the function of the root is to help in, absorption of water and also provide support, anchor the plant to the soil. Of course, as the banyan tree grows taller and becomes bigger and bigger, the roots also would have started to branch and it can support absorption comfortably. Okay, but the problem becomes it becomes a problem for the plant because the canopy is so huge. All of this whole tree is anchored and supported by just this one root system. The weight might become too much. This stem, if there is a heavy wind or something, can topple over and fall. You do not want that to happen, right? So that is why the plant very cleverly will give out adventitious roots from its branches that will grow towards the soil, grow longer towards the soil and act like pillars and provide additional support to this huge tree which has a huge canopy. Okay, so that way these extra roots, adventitious roots that arise from the stems will provide mechanical support to trees like banyan trees. Such roots are called prop roots. So prop roots are adventitious roots that arise from stem, arise from the branches of the stem. What is it doing? It is providing support, mechanical support to the tree and making sure that the tree doesn't fall and topple off because of its own weight, right? Again, we have another example for root modified for support. You can see this in grass family like sugarcane and maize. You call this stilt roots. There is a problem with sugarcane, maize and these kind of plants as well because the stem is very long like this. It can grow very long and you have a fibrous root. Since these are monocot plants, you have proper fibrous root. But this fibrous root cannot provide sufficient support. Okay, so if this is a sugarcane stem, if there is a strong wind or something, the stem can break and detach from the root system altogether. In order to prevent that from happening, in order to have extra support, especially the leaves, especially the stem region, we call the regions from the on the stem from which the leaves arise, we call these nodes. Okay, so all of these joint like things that you see in sugarcane and maize, these are called the nodes. Okay, especially from the lower nodes closer to the soil, roots will start arising. Again, these are adventitious roots because they are arising from the stem and they have not developed from the radicle. They will start growing like this, and just like how in a tent you have different strings providing support, this will also grow and provide support for the stem. Such roots are called stilt roots. proproot, banyan, stiltroot, maize and sugarcane. They provide support. Okay. Now, modifications for respiration. In some plants, what happens, especially the plants that grow in mangrove vegetation, like this one called Rhizophora, you can see all of these horn-like structures that are jutting out of the surface of water, right? So what happens is these plants, they grow in waterlogged conditions. You know, for the plant to grow, water is essential, but there should be sufficient aeration as well, because roots also require oxygen for respiration. If it is waterlogged, oxygen availability becomes a problem for roots. Okay, every part of the plant requires oxygen. Plants need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, but to perform respiration, they need oxygen as well, like all of us. Okay, so roots are not getting sufficient oxygen because there is waterlogging all the time. In order to, get oxygen, get access to oxygen, what basically happens in these plants is, if you look at these plants, they will have, if this is the plant, let's say, it will have, Rhizophora is a dicot plant, it will have normal taproot system. But along with this taproot system, there will be adventitious roots formed. And these adventitious roots, of course, some horizontal roots also will be present. They will branch out outside the surface of water like that. They will have pores on their surface. Through those pores, exchange of gases will take place. So it will help in the process of respiration. That's why these are also called respiratory roots or breathing roots. Okay, so they help in the process of exchange of gases in the roots. One thing is, generally we say that roots are positively geotropic, they grow downwards towards gravity, towards the soil, but this is one case where roots are growing away from the soil. Here the roots are negatively geotropic. Okay, this is unusual or not very frequently seen in plants. Very rarely you observe roots that are growing against gravity. Okay, so this is one such rare occasion. Now let's talk about the stem. So what do we already know about the stem? We know that the stem is the ascending part or the above ground part of the plant. It bears different appendages such as the root, such as the leaves, flowers and fruits. And also in the stem, there are specific regions. Okay, so if you think of this as the stem, just one moment. If this is a stem, there are specific regions on the stem from which the leaves arise. Right? Leaves arise from specific regions on the stem. Those points from which the leaves arise, like from here, from here, from here, these are parts of the stem from which leaves arise. They are called nodes. Nodes are part of the stem from which the leaves will arise. In between two nodes, whatever region is there, we call that internode. Inter means in between. Internode means the region between two nodes. So in the stem, you have regions called nodes and internodes. Okay, nodes and internodes are part of the stem. At the angle between the stem and the leaf, this angle, okay, so this is called the axil. At the axil, buds will be present. We call that the axillary or lateral bud. In the axillary or lateral bud, meristematic tissues will be present. They are capable of undergoing cell division. So from the axillary buds, either branches or flowers can arise. Okay. At the tip of the stem also, bud will be present. You call that the terminal or apical bud. Okay. Axillary bud, apical buds are part of the stem. Nodes and internodes are also part of the stem. Okay. So in the bud, you will in the stem you will find buds, and they may be terminal at the tip, which is also called apical, or it may be axillary at the axil of the leaves, which is also called lateral bud. Now the color of the stem, whenever the plant is young, whenever it is young and flexible, it will be green in color, it will be photosynthetic. But as the plant grows older, in most cases, in case of shrubs and big trees, you can see that the stem becomes brown. It turns brown, it will no longer be photosynthetic, right? So young stems are generally green and turns woody or dark brown later. Okay? Now, I already told you what nodes and internodes are. These points from which the leaves arise, these points, they are the nodes. The region between the nodes, they are the internodes. Okay, next. What are the primary functions of the stem? The primary function is very simple. It bears appendages like the leaves, flowers and fruits, and also it helps in conduction of substances. If to the leaf, the water that is absorbed by the root has to reach, it can reach through the stem itself, right? And whatever food the leaf prepares, if it has to reach the roots, then it will reach through the stem itself, right? So it acts like a connection between the root and the leaves and different parts of the plant. So it helps in conduction of substances, transport of substances across different parts of the plant. All right? Now, let's talk about the modifications of stem. Similar to how in roots we saw they had primary functions, sometimes due to some reasons they take up functions other than the primary functions and we call it modifications. Something similar you can find even in stems, we call them stem modification. Stem can get modified for various reasons such as storage of food and also act as organs of perennation. I'll explain to you what this means. To provide support for offering protection, photosynthesis, vegetative propagation and all of that, stems can be modified. Let's take a look at all of these one by one, starting with storage or organs of perennation. Storage is very simple to understand. Storage means it's storing some reserve food. Organ of perennation means what? Whenever there is unfavorable condition, if the plant is not able to survive, then this will have reserve food, right? So it will survive and tide over unfavorable conditions. On the return of favorable conditions, you can, it will, generate the new plant, give rise to the new plant again. So it acts like an organ of perennation to tide over unfavorable conditions. Now here as examples for stem modifications modified for storage, you have potato, ginger, turmeric, zameen khand, which is also called amorphophallus, and you also have colocasia. Now one question that most students have is, how do you get to know if a modification is a root modification or a stem modification when you obtain it from underground, right? It's an underground part of the plant. Carrot is also formed underground, radish is also formed underground, sweet potato is underground, ginger is underground. The general notion that people have is that anything that is found under the ground is root. But here we see that it is not a root, it is a stem. How can you say which is a stem, which is a root? In that case, you have to check for the presence of nodes and internodes. If there are nodes and internodes, if there are axillary buds, then you can say it is a part of the stem. In carrot and turnip and sweet potato, you don't see nodes and internodes. But in these plant parts, in these plants, you can very clearly distinguish the nodes and internodes. Here, all these lines represent the nodes. Even in turmeric, you have all these ring like lines, they represent the nodes. The leaves are not green over here, they are very small, thin and scaly, but they represent the nodes. In potato, whatever eyes you see, they represent the axillary buds. So from that you can say that it is a stem modification and not a root modification. So if there is something underground, if you want to check whether it is a root or a stem, you have to look for nodes and internodes. If it's present, then it is a stem modification. If there's no node and internode, it is a root modification. Okay. Now, let's talk about stem modified for providing support. We call such supportive stem modification as tendrils. We learn about tendrils in the leaf as well. But here we are talking about the stem tendrils. How do these stem tendrils form? At the node, if this is a stem and from the node, the leaf is arising, right? So you have nodes from which the leaves arise. At the axil, we will have axillary buds, right? These are the axillary buds. In some plants that require axillary buds, additional support, probably because they're creepers or they're climbers, the stem will not be strong enough to hold the plant upright. If it has to climb around some form of support, it requires tendrils. Okay, it will require tendrils. So in stem modification that we see in cucumber, pumpkin, watermelon, grapevine, this axillary bud itself will get modified to form thin structures like this, which can help in climbing. So these are called stem tendrils. Though you see them arising from the axil of the leaf, we are calling them stem tendrils because it is forming from the axillary bud. Axillary bud is modifying to form the tendril. Since axillary bud is a part of the stem, we call it the stem tendril. You can see here, this is the leaf petiole, here is the stem. From the axil, you can see that the tendril has formed. It is helping it wind around some form of vertical support, right? So if it is forming from the axillary bud, we call it stem tendrils. Now, stem can be modified to offer protection as well. We see that in the case of citrus plants in bougainvillea. What happens here again is the stem will have nodes. At the nodes, it will bear leaves. At the axil of the leaves, axillary buds will be present, but these axillary buds will modify into thorns. Okay? Axillary buds are modified to form thorns. What is it offering protection against? Against herbivorous organisms. You know, herbivorous organisms come and feed on these plants. So if there are thorns, those organisms, cattle, cow, sheep, buffalo, they will prevent or avoid feeding on these kind of plants, because obviously their mouth will get damaged, their mouth parts will get damaged. That's why they will avoid such plants. That way this plant is protected from herbivorous organisms. You know, when a tiger is chasing a deer, the deer is an animal, it can move, it can run away and escape. But plants cannot escape from herbivorous organisms. That is why they will develop and evolve certain modifications, certain adaptations will happen, which will, increase its chances of survival and protect from herbivory. Over here, protection from herbivory is happening. Along with that, the presence of thorns will also reduce the rate of transpiration and help in water conservation. Okay, next, stem can be modified to perform photosynthesis as well. We generally see this in the case of xerophytes, desert plants such as cactus and euphorbia. So over here what happens is the stem will become thick and photosynthetic. Generally the cooking job or making food job is of the leaf. But these plants grow in regions where there is not sufficient water, there is water scarcity, there is not sufficient water in the soil, the temperature is too high, the humidity is very low, it's very dry. In such cases, transpiration will happen a lot. Transpiration mostly happens through the stomata, which is abundant in leaves. So if the leaves are like normal leaves, then what will happen? Increase transpiration, increase water loss will happen, plant will not be able to survive. So what they do is, they will reduce those leaves that are wide and cause a lot of transpiration into small spines. And food has to be done by one or the other person. If the leaf is not doing, somebody else or some other part has to take up that function, right? So the stem here takes up the function of the leaf and becomes thick and fleshy and green in color, and it performs the photosynthetic job. Okay. So here some stems, like in our cactus, Opuntia is its scientific name, you can see that the stem is flat. And in some plants like euphorbia, you can see that the stem is cylindrical. Okay, over here, the stem that is modified, become thick, fleshy and green to perform photosynthesis is called phyllotaxy. Okay, next, stems can be modified for vegetative propagation as well, for a type of asexual reproduction as well. There are 4 types here: runner, stolon, offset and sucker. We'll understand the different types. You can see these runners in grasses and strawberry. What basically happens here is, there will be an underground portion of the stem. This underground portion of the stem, it will start giving out lateral branches like this. Okay. So at some nodes, the branches will go above ground and form a small plant like thing. new plants. If there is any damage to this branch, or if older plants, older parts die, then newer plants will continue. Okay, so something similar you can see in strawberry as well. These are called runners, where there is a portion of the stem below the ground that will give out lateral branches, and that will help in vegetative propagation. Similar, you have stolon, very similar, not much difference. This can be seen in the case of mint and jasmine. Mint is pudina. Okay, so here what happens is a small branch will arise from the part of the stem very close to the soil, basically from the base of the stem, you can say. So what happens here is, for a while it will grow upright above like this. Eventually it will arch down and form this arch like structure. Okay, this is called stolon, and again it touches the ground. Wherever it touches the ground, again roots and shoot system, stem and leaves will form. This is called a stolon. Now next one is called offset. Offset also what happens is, from the stem there will be lateral sideways branching. This you can see in aquatic plants. Okay, yeah, aquatic plants. So here at each node, this is the stem, okay, giving out lateral branches. At each node on top, you can see a rosette of leaves. Rosette of leaves. Rosette means what? Normally, if this is the stem, this is the leaf, internode will be long, right? Imagine all the internodes have condensed. It will appear like the leaves are arising from a common point. So if leaves are developing like that, where the internodal length is highly reduced, we call it a rosette of leaves. So on top you will have a rosette of leaves, and at the bottom towards the base you will have a tuft of roots. If it bears a rosette of leaves and a tuft of roots, we call it offset. Eichhornia is a very good example. Pistia also is an offset only. Last one, we have sucker. Sucker you can see in banana, chrysanthemum, pineapple. Here what happens is, you have the stem. Lateral branches originate from the basal underground portion of the stem, like this one here. Initially it will grow obliquely, then it will become, perpendicular to the ground and form a new branch like thing. From this it is possible to obtain a new plant. Okay. So underground portion of the main stem, it grows horizontally beneath the soil and come out obliquely upward and give rise to leafy shoots. First for a period it is horizontal, then it will become oblique, and then it will become upright like that, almost perpendicular to the surface of the soil, and then it can give rise to a new plant. Even on this, leafy shoots and all of that will form. So that is also an example for sucker, where stem is modified to perform vegetative propagation. Even over here you can see horizontal for some time, then oblique, then upright. Okay, oblique means slant. Next, leaf. What do we already know about the leaf? Leaf is green in color in most cases, generally green. It is a lateral appendage, which means it arises from the side of the stem. They are flat and very thin structures. They are not very fleshy and thick, right? Where do they develop? They develop at the node in stems, but node is not a part of the leaf, it is a part of stem. At the axil, it may bear a bud. Again, that axillary bud is a part of the stem. How do these leaves originate? If this is the shoot tip, if this is the tip of the shoot, similar to how at the root tip you had root apical meristem, at the shoot tip you will have shoot apical meristem. From that shoot apical meristem, leaves will develop. Okay. These are arranged in acropetal order. What does acropetal order mean now? If you take a stem, you know that leaves arise from the nodes. The leaves that are towards the base are older, towards the tip are younger. So if you have older leaves towards the base and younger leaves, relatively younger leaves at the tip, Such kind of arrangement is called acropetal arrangement. Okay, so that is about the characteristic features of leaves. Now, there are three different parts to a leaf. One is the leaf base, one is the leaf stalk which is called the petiole, and the expanded part of the leaf which we call the lamina or the leaf blade. What is the leaf base? Leaf base is the point of the leaf which attaches to the stem. Like if this is the stalk of the leaf, this part, the base of the stalk attaches to the stem. This is called the leaf base. Okay. So the leaf base is the part of the leaf that attaches the leaf to the stem. In some plants, at the leaf base, two small leaf-like structures are present. In some plants, it will be present, small leaf-like structures present in a pair. Generally, we call them stipules. Whenever stipules are present in a plant, we say that the plant leaf is stipulate. Whenever stipules are absent, we say that it is exstipulate. Okay. Now, in some plants, what happens is the leaf base is slightly swollen. If the leaf base is swollen, we have a special name. We call it the pulvinous. Such swollen leaf bases can be seen in members belonging to Fabaceae family such as peas and beans. Yeah, it's right here. You can see how over here at the base it is swollen, right? It is swollen. So this can be seen in leguminous plants such as pea plant. Another variation that you can see in leaf bases, sheathing leaf base. If you see monocots, if this is a stem, if this is the leaf base, the leaf base will partially or completely cover the leaf like that. If you've seen sugarcane leaves while you're removing it for Sankranti or whatever, you may have noticed how a part of the leaf base covers the stem. So if it's covering it, we call it a sheath. So such leaves are called, such leaf bases are said to be sheathing leaf base. So the leaf base is not normal, it will expand a little bit, and as you can see in this case, it has completely covered the stem. Sometimes it may partially cover the stem. So we call that sheathing leaf base. You can see this in the case of monocots like sugarcane, maize and all of that. Okay. Now, petiole. Petiole is the stalk of the leaf. What is the need for a petiole? Whenever a petiole is there, we call the leaf petiolate. Whenever there is no petiole, we say that it is sessile. Okay. So majorly, whenever petiole is present, its function is to sway the leaf in air, in wind, so that fresh air comes to its surface. Whenever the temperature is very high, it will help in cooling the leaf also. Okay. So it allows the leaf blade to flutter in wind and it cools the leaf and brings fresh air to its surface. That is what the function of petiole is. Excuse me, if you were putting on earphones, I'm so sorry. Yeah. So the third part is the leaf blade or the lamina. This is the broadest part of the leaf, the expanded part of the leaf. Here you will have many veins and veinlets present. In dicot plants, you will have a prominent central vein present that is called the midrib. Basically, in all of these veins, you have xylem and phloem vascular tissue that are transporting food and water and other substances across different parts of the plant. The veins function obviously is to offer, help in transport and stuff, but it does offer protection as well, because when you look at xylem, most of the cells in xylem are dead cells. Whenever there are dead cells, they will have very thick walls, so they can offer mechanical support. So these veins offer mechanical support also to the leaf. Okay. Now, let's talk about the variation in leaves. If you look at nature around you, you can see so many different plants have so many different types of leaves. Leaves can vary in terms of how green it is, what shade of green it is, what is its shape, what does its apex look like, how much surface area does it have, what is the margin like, do you see any incisions like this, or is it like a smooth margin? So based on all of that, you can find so much variety in leaves around you. We are going to learn about the difference in how veins are arranged in leaves. The arrangement of veins on leaves is called venation. Okay, it is the arrangement of veins and veinlets in the leaf lamina. You have two basic types. One is reticulate and one is parallel. Reticulum means network. You see reticulate type of venation in dicotyledonous plants. So over here, as you can see, there is a midrib. You have a lot of branches. These branches further branch, and form a network-like structure. So we call it the reticulum. Parallel venation you can see in monocot plants. Over here, the veins run parallel to each other. See, everybody has, I hope, had a meal on a banana leaf. So you would have seen a banana leaf. You can see how there's a prominent midrib, but on either sides, the veins don't form a network. They're parallel to each other like this. Okay, so this is called parallel venation. This is something you may have learnt in your lower grades in high school as well. Now let's talk about the types of leaves. Leaves can be categorized into two types, simple leaf and compound leaf. Now this classification depends on how is the margin of the leaf. What I'm highlighting here is called the margin of the leaf. Okay, so in some plants, in some species, you can see that the margin is smooth like this. There are no incisions at all. In that case, we say that the margin is entire. There's no teeth like marking. If teeth like marking is there, we call it incised or incision. So if there is no teeth like thing, it's a smooth margin, we call it entire. In this, you can see there are incisions, but they are not very deep. Okay, incisions are there, but they are not deep. When the incisions are there and they are not deep enough to touch the midrib or reach the midrib, then you call it simple leaf. Incisions may be this deep also, but as long as it's not touching the midrib, it is called a simple leaf itself. Okay, a lamina is entire, or even when incisions are there, the incisions do not touch the midrib, it should be. Incisions do not touch the midrib. Compound leaf, what happens is, if this is the leaf, the lamina is not entire, incision is there 100%. The incisions are so deep that if this was the leaf, it will be so deep that it has divided the whole leaf into many tiny parts called the leaflets. In such case, we call it a compound leaf. Now, when you look at a leaflet, how will you know, if you look at a compound leaf, how will you know if this entirely is one leaf or each one of this is a leaf? Is this a leaflet? How do you know? If each of these was a leaf, at the axil of each one, there should have been an axillary bud, but that doesn't happen. Instead, there will be only one axillary bud over here. This indicates that this is a compound leaf. Okay, so in compound leaf, what happens? Incisions of the lamina reach the midrib and break it into many small leaflets. How do I know this is a compound leaf and each individually is not a simple leaf? Because over here you do not find axillary buds at all. The axillary bud will be present here at the axil. Okay, so that indicates that this is a compound leaf. Compound leaf has two types, pinnately compound, palmately compound. Pinna means feather-like. Palmately. Palm means palm of your hand. See, over here, if this was the leaf, it has gotten incisions like this and it forms a compound leaf that resembles a feather, as in the case of neem plant. You can see this is the neem leaf. In silk cotton, you can see compound leaf that appears like the palm of your hand. Over here, if the leaf was like this, incisions will happen and it will reach the midrib like that, and the leaflets will appear to be arising from a common point. It will appear like the palm of your hand, so you call it palmately compound. Example for this would be neem leaf. Example for this is silk cotton. Okay, now let's talk about phyllotaxy. Phyllotaxy is the arrangement of leaves on the stem. You have three types: alternate, opposite and whorled. I'll tell you what happens in each type. Okay, it's basically dependent on how many leaves arise at each node. Okay, so if these are three nodes and at each node only one leaf arises, you call it alternate. It alternates once to this side, once to that side. So one leaf at each node. In opposite, at each node, you can see two leaves arising. Two leaves at each node. In world phyllotaxy, you will see more than two leaves at each node. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 arising from the same node. If there is more than two leaves, then we call it world phyllotaxy. Okay, for this you will have to remember examples. Examples for alternate, you have hibiscus, which is also called China rose, mustard plant and sunflower. For opposite, you have two types. One is opposite superposed and the other one is opposite decussate. The difference between these two is that in superposed, you can see that the pair of leaves that are present at each node, they are present at the same plane, at the same angle at each node. Over here in decussate, you see if this is one node, at one node if the leaves are in this plane, in the next node it will be at right angles, 90 degrees, it will be like this. Again in the next node it will be like this. In that case we call it opposite decussate. Opposite superposed you can see in guava and opposite decussate you can see in calotropis. Okay. Now let's talk about world phyllotaxy that can be found in a plant called Alstonia. Alright, that's about phyllotaxy. Now let's move on and learn about modifications in leaves. So similar to how we saw modifications happening in root and stem, leaf modifications also happen. The leaf's primary function is to perform photosynthesis. If it's doing something else other than cooking food and performing photosynthesis, then we call it a leaf modification. What are the different reasons due to which leaves could be modified? For providing support during climbing, for defense, for storage, to perform photosynthesis, to trap insects. These are the different ways in which leaves can be modified. First, let's talk about support. Similar to how we saw in the case of pumpkin and grapevine, how the stem was modified, axillary bud was modified to form the tendril. Over here, you can see that the leaf itself is modified to form a tendril. This does the same job. It provides support while climbing. So this is called a leaf tendril, that is a stem tendril. We studied Opuntia as an example for stem modification, where I said it's called phyllote. When the stem becomes photosynthetic, it is a stem modification called phyllote. But over here, the leaves are also modified. The stem is also modified, leaf is also modified. The leaves become very small and spiny, very pointed and sharp, and it will protect the plant from herbivorous organisms and also helps in conserving water due to reducing the rate of transpiration. Okay, so cactus is an example for stem modification as well as leaf modification. Stem modification is phyllote, here leaves become spines. Now students get confused between spines and thorns. Thorns is a stem modification where the axillary bud modifies to form the pointed thorn-like structure. So that can be seen in bougainvillea and citrus plants. This is leaf becoming modified to form spines. So yeah, both of them help in defense and preventing herbivory, but that is formed from the axillary bud, the thorns, and these arise from leaves. So these are basically leaves themselves reduced and become pointed. So here we call it spines. Okay. Next we have fleshy leaves. Like you see in the case of onion and garlic, how the leaves are fleshy. We use that for cooking food, right? So here it is storing food. And then we have phyllote. Phyllote is seen in Australian acacia. Here what happens is, generally when you take the different parts of a leaf, you have the leaf base, then you have the petiole, and then you have the lamina, right? So in this case what happens is, the lamina is short-lived. Okay, so this is actually the lamina part. It is short-lived. It falls off. Therefore, after the lamina itself falls off, the petiole, which is usually like a small thin stick, will expand and become wider and performs the function of photosynthesis. In this case, we call this a phyllote. Over there we saw phyllotaxy, here we saw phyllote. In cactus, the stem modification is called phyllotaxy, here we call it the phyllote. Okay. So over here what is happening? The petiole itself is expanding and taking up the function of the lamina. Last modification, insectivorous plants. You know, insectivorous plants grow in regions where there is deficiency of nitrogen in the soil. In order to make up for the deficiency of nitrogen in the soil, they will trap insects. So they will have special mechanisms which will allow it to trap insects. Once the insect is trapped, certain enzymes are secreted by this plant that will break down the insect. After the insect is broken down, it absorbs nitrogen from that particular insect. Okay, so here the leaves are modified to form structures that can trap insects. For example, if you look at this pitcher plant, the leaf is modified to form a pitcher like structure. Okay, so inside this all the digestive juices will be present. The walls of this are very slippery, so if an insect gets attracted to this pitcher and goes inside, it will slip down and fall down and get digested. Here also you can see leaves modified to form trap like structures that can trap insects. This is a Venus flytrap plant. So that's about leaf modifications. So far we have finished talking about the root, stem, leaves. Vegetative parts is over. Now we have to start talking about and learning about the reproductive parts. What is an inflorescence? You may have seen how some plants produce one flower and some plants produce a bunch of flowers. So that bunch of flowers technically is called an inflorescence. So you will have a floral axis on which flowers are arranged. That is called the inflorescence. So inflorescence is the arrangement of flowers on the floral axis. So this is called the floral axis. On this axis, flowers will be arranged. Okay. Now this inflorescence, if the flower is just a single flower and not a bunch of flowers, then you call it solitary. Okay, solitary means single, you know that, right? And then when it is like more than one flowers, it can either exist in the form of a racemose inflorescence or a cymose inflorescence. We'll learn about all of these one by one, starting with solitary flower. Here what happens is, if this is the shoot tip, if this is the tip of the shoot, generally at the tip of the shoot you have shoot apical meristem. That shoot apical meristem is what will give rise to the leaves and everything. When a single flower forms, the shoot tip, whatever meristematic tissue is there at the shoot tip, that will directly transform into a flower. Then you will get a single flower. In case of racemose inflorescence, you see that there will be acropetal succession. What is acropetal succession? We've already learnt about it in leaves. I said leaves are arranged in acropetal manner, which means that the bottom leaves, the leaves at the base, towards the base are older and the leaves towards the tip are much younger. So here you can see that in Gulmohar, I'm sure everybody has seen this. If you look at this inflorescence, you can see how very clearly the older flowers, the larger flowers are at the base, and towards the tip you have more and more young flowers. In this case, the tip of the floral axis does not terminate in a flower. At the tip you do not have a flower. So we say that this shows indefinite growth, because the tip itself is not ending or terminating in a flower. This can grow indefinitely. And here the flowers are arranged in acropetal manner, which means that the older ones are towards the base and the younger ones are towards the apex. Exactly opposite of this is what you see in cymose inflorescence. That can be seen in jasmine. I'm sure everybody has also seen jasmine. The difference here is that the tip of the floral axis terminates in the flower, and this is the oldest flower. So the oldest flower is at the tip and the younger flowers are towards the base. Since the oldest flower or the flower, the floral axis terminates with a flower, here you do not see indefinite growth. Here the growth is definite. And you can say that the growth here is limited. Okay. So the flowers here are born in a basipetal succession or basipetal order. What that means is the oldest flower is at the tip and the younger ones are towards the base. Okay. Now, that's about the two types of inflorescence. Let's talk about the different parts of a flower. In a flower, this is a typical angiosperm flower. Of course, there are exceptions. Not all flowers have stalks, not all flowers have petals. So there are many exceptions, but this is a typical flower, the parts of which you can see in majority of the cases. Okay. So the stalk of a flower is called pedicel. On the pedicel, you will have a broad base, which is called the thalamus. On the thalamus, floral parts are arranged in the form of concentric circles. We call them whorls. The outermost whorl or the outermost concentric circle is made up of calyx. Calyx is the collective term that we use to refer to all the sepals. That is usually green in color, very small leaf-like, and it protects the flower in the bud condition. Inside that, you have the corolla. Corolla is the collective term used to denote all the petals in a flower. Inside that, you have the male reproductive part. In the third whorl, which is the androecium. Androecium includes the stamens and the innermost whorl of the four is the female reproductive part, which is the gynoecium. Okay, and gynoecium is also called pistil. The units of gynoecium are called carpels. Okay, so these are the different parts of a flower. Corolla and calyx are not absolutely essential. Of course, if they are there, it is helpful in the process of sexual reproduction. Calyx protects the flower in the bud condition. Corolla attracts the pollinators. But even if they are not there, sexual reproduction can still take place. But androecium and gynoecium are absolutely essential. Without them, the male and female gametes and gametophytes will not be forming. Therefore, you say that the calyx and corolla are non-essential or accessory whorls, while gynoecium and androecium are absolutely essential whorls. Okay, there are some plants, especially in monocots, you see that there is only one whorl of accessory or non-essential whorl. Instead of having calyx and corolla, they will have just one whorl. And if there is only one whorl that is not differentiated into calyx and corolla, you call it the perianth. And the units of perianth are called tepals. Calyx is sepals, corolla is petals, perianth is tepals. Okay, its units are called tepals. Now let's learn about the classification of different types of flowers. Flowers can be classified into different types based on so many different criteria. First, let's learn about classification of flowers into two criteria depending upon whether they have both androecium and gynoecium or they have only one of those. When both androecium and gynoecium is present in the same flower, we call such flowers bisexual flowers. Bi means two. Both androecium and gynoecium are present. Example for that is mustard flower. In unisexual flowers, you will have either androecium or gynoecium. If only androecium is present, if it's a male flower, we call that flower staminate. If it is a female flower and has only gynoecium, we call it pistillate. Okay, so androecium and gynoecium are both, if both are present, it's bisexual. If only one of them, you call it unisexual. Uni means one, right? If it's only male, it's staminate. If it's only female, gynoecium is present, you call it pistillate. Next, depending upon symmetry, also you can classify flowers. I'm sure you've learnt in animal kingdom how you classify organisms based on symmetry, whether it is radially symmetrical, bilaterally symmetrical, same way even here. First is called radial symmetry. If a flower shows radial symmetry, we say that it is actinomorphic. Now, what is radial symmetry? Radial symmetry is when you take any object and you pass it, you cut it, you try to cut it. By passing it through the center, by passing the plane through the center, in any plane if you cut it, you will get two equal halves. Okay. So, if I cut this flower in this angle, in this plane, while the place is passing through the center, I will get two equal halves like this. If I cut it through in this plane, which passes through the center, I will get two equal halves. If I cut it like this, I get two equal halves. So, In any plane that passes through the center, if I cut the flower, I will get two equal halves. Of course, it has to pass through the center. If I cut it like this, that doesn't pass through the center, obviously I will not get two equal halves. Okay. Radial symmetry is when a flower can be divided into two equal halves in any radial plane that passes through the center. Example for that you can see in mustard, datura and chili. Now what is zygomorphic flowers? Whenever a flower shows bilateral symmetry, then we say that it is zygomorphic. Now what is bilateral symmetry? In bilateral symmetry, in any plane you will not get two equal halves. Only through one vertical plane that passes through the center you will get two equal halves. Okay, only in one plane. So yeah, so you can see it here. If it is passing through this plane, then we get two equal halves. A flower can be divided into two equal halves only in one vertical plane that passes through the center. Here, in any radial plane that passes through the center, you will get two equal halves. Here, only through one plane, and that plane has to be vertical and it has to pass through the center. Only then we will get two equal halves. Asymmetrical flowers are irregular flowers. No matter how you cut it, which plane you cut it, you will never get two equal halves. That is called irregular or asymmetric. Zygomorphic can be seen in pea family. Pea, gulmohar, bean, cassia, they are zygomorphic. And asymmetric flowers can be seen in canna, which is a monocot plant. Okay. So no matter which plane you pass it through, you will never get two equal halves. Alright. Yeah. So this is one way of classifying flowers. The next is based on the number of appendages in the flower. A flower can have sepals, petals, stamens and carpels in either multiples of 4, 3 or 5 depending upon how many are present. You can classify them into trimerous, tetramerous and pentamerous. Tri means 3, right? So in trimerous flowers, the floral appendages like sepals and petals are present in multiples of 3. In tetramerous, tetra means 4. In tetramerous flowers, floral appendages are present in multiples of 4. In pentamerous, floral appendages are present in multiples of 5. 5 petals or 10 petals, 5 sepals, 10 stamens like that. If it's present in multiples of 5, we call it pentamerous. Trimerous multiples of 3, tetramerous 4, pentamerous 5. Okay. Now, let's talk about the classification of flowers based on the presence or absence of bracts. What are bracts? Bracts are small leaf-like appendages that are present at the base of the pedicel. If this is the pedicel and this is the flower, you can see that in some flowers a small single stipules were present at the base of the leaf. Right near the leaf base, a pair was present. Similarly, here at the base of the pedicel, you can see not two like stipules, but just in most cases, one leaf-like appendage present. This is called the bract. If bract is present, such a flower is said to be bracteate. If a bract is absent, we call such flowers ebracteate. Okay. Next, classification of flowers based on the position of other whorls with respect to the ovary. Totally we have 4 whorls. You have outside calyx, inner to that you have corolla, then you have androecium, then you have gynoecium. In the gynoecium you have the ovary. So what is the position of the other whorls in the flower with respect to this ovary? Based on that you can classify flowers. Okay, there are 3 types: hypogynous, epigynous and perigynous. Hypo means what? Hypo means below. Gynous here refers to gynoecium, or you can think of it as ovary. If ovary occupies the topmost position, as in this case, and all other whorls arise from below, this is the calyx, here you have the corolla, here you have the androecium stamen. So if the other whorls are arising from below the gynoecium, the flower is said to be hypogynous. Hypo means below. Below the gynoecium, other whorls are arising. And this ovary is said to be a superior ovary. If the flower is hypogynous, the ovary will be superior. Why is it superior? It is occupying the highest position. If you look at which is the topmost, it is the ovary. That's why you call it the superior ovary. Where can you find the superior ovary? In a hypogynous flower. Whenever the other whorls are arising from below, obviously the ovary will occupy the highest position, right? In that case, in the case of hypogynous flowers, you can see a superior ovary. Here, gynoecium occupies the highest position. All other whorls are below the gynoecium. Ovary is said to be superior. You can see this in mustard, hibiscus and brinjal. Next, perigynous flowers. Peri means what? Peri means around. Gynous here again is relating to ovary, which is a part of the gynoecium. Here, the other whorls arise from pretty much the same position as the ovary. Here, the thalamus forms a cup-like structure. Okay? So, the thalamus forms a cup-like structure, and at the rim of the cup, you know what a rim is? Rim is at the bottle's mouth, you have that opening, right? That is called the rim. If the thalamus forms a cup-like structure, it will have a rim, right? So, if you can think of this as the rim of the thalamus, from that same level, the other whorls will also arise. So, gynoecium is present at the center, other whorls almost at the same level, at the rim of the thalamus. Ovary here, if you look at it, if this is the rim of the thalamus, one part of the ovary is above, one part of the ovary is below. So, it's half inferior and half superior. So, such an ovary can be called half inferior or half superior. This can be seen in the case of peach, plum and rose. Okay. Now, the last type, epigynous. Epi means above. Gynous or gynoecium obviously relates to the ovary. Over here, the wall of the ovary completely fuses with the thalamus. Thalamus forms a cup-like structure. Here you have the ovary in the center. The thalamus completely fuses with the wall of the ovary, as you can see in this diagram. Whatever is here in dark green represents the thalamus. Whatever is here in light green that I am shading right now, this is the ovary. You can see how the outer cup-like dark green thalamus has completely fused with the wall of the ovary, right? So here, where are the other whorls arising from? You have the sepals here, the petals here, the stamen here. So, in comparison with the position of the ovary, where are the other whorls arising from? They are arising from above the level of the ovary. Since the other whorls are arising from above the ovary, you call it epigynous. Now, what is the position of the ovary here? Ovary occupying the lowest position. So, you say that the ovary here is inferior. Hypogynous flower, inferior ovary. Epigynous flower, superior ovary. Perigynous flower, half inferior ovary. Okay, so this ovary is said to be inferior, and you can find this in guava, cucumber. In sunflower, you have a type of floret called ray floret. Over there, you can see this. Okay, now let's talk about the different parts of a flower. I've already explained this to you. In a flower, you have stalk and then you have the thalamus. On the thalamus, you have different parts. Calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium from outside to inside. Calyx and corolla are accessory or non-essential whorls, and androecium and gynoecium are essential whorls. We have to learn about the variations in each of these different flower parts. Okay, we'll start with the calyx. Now, the calyx units are called sepals, we already know. In some flowers, the sepals are fused, in some they are free. Whenever the sepals are fused, we have a term to represent that, technical term, and whenever they are free, not attached to each other, not fused, then there is a specific term. Whenever they are free, we call it polysepalous. Many sepals are there and they are free, not connected, attached to each other, no fusion. Whenever they are fused to form a cup-like structure, as you can see in the case of hibiscus, then you call it gamosepalous. Polysepalous means they are free, not fused. Gamosepalous means they are fused. Here you can see how they are free individually. Here you can see they are fused to form this cup-like structure. What you're looking at here is the calyx. These things are epicalyx. Okay, don't worry about that. This is the calyx. It has formed a cup-like structure. It has fused and formed a cup-like structure. Same thing for petals also. Petals may have fused to form a tubular structure or a bell-like structure, or sometimes they are free. When they are free, we call it polypetalous. When they are fused, you call it gamopetalous. You can see images here. Here petals are free. Here it is fused to form a cup or a bell-like structure. Okay. Next, arrangement of sepals and petals with respect to each other. So over here, this is called aestivation. In aestivation, we study about how petals are arranged with respect to each other. At a time, you're looking at only one word. Either you're looking at the sepals or you're looking at the petals. Let's assume we're looking at the petals. When you're looking at the petals, how is one petal arranged with respect to another neighboring petal? Is there some sort of overlapping? Are they touching at all? If they are touching, how is the overlapping? Is there any specific pattern? So you look at all of these. This is called aestivation. Okay. So in aestivation, we basically study about the arrangement of sepals and petals in a floral bud with respect to other members of the same whorl. You're looking at all the petals and how they are arranged with respect to each other, or all sepals and how they are arranged with respect to each other. You have 4 different types of aestivation. There is valvate, twisted, imbricate and vexillary. In valvate aestivation, you can see how the petals are not fused. They are not overlapping each other. They are barely touching each other at the margin. What you're looking at here is the representation of petals. Okay, each one is a petal or sepal here. As you can see, at the margin, there is no overlapping. They probably barely just touch each other at the margin like that. Then what do we call it? We call it valvate aestivation. It's not velvet, it is valvate aestivation. Sepals or petals touch each other at the margin. This can be seen in the case of calotropis. Okay, we learnt about calotropis as an example before also when we spoke about opposite decussate phyllotaxy, right? It's the same plant. Next, imbricate aestivation. Imbricate aestivation, there is overlapping. Okay, I'm sorry, we are talking about twisted aestivation, then we will do imbricate. In twisted aestivation, there is overlapping. It so happens that one margin of the petal on one side is overlapped by its neighboring one, and in the other side it is overlapping the previous one. That is called twisted aestivation. One margin of the sepal or petal overlaps that of the next and so on. See, I'll show you here. Each petal or sepal will be half in, half out. Okay, so let's consider this petal first. If you look at this petal, this is one margin, this is one margin. If you look at the neighboring petal, immediate next one, this petal is being overlapped by this one. So this petal is half inside. If you look at its previous petal, this petal is overlapping the previous one. So it is half outside. If you look at each petal, you can see how it is half outside, half inside. Okay, so here this petal is outside. This is in. This petal is outside on this side, it is inside here. Likewise, this will be outside here and this will be inside here. This one is outside here. So each petal or sepal will be half outside, half inside. If this is one petal, this petal will be overlapped by the next petal and it will be overlapping the previous petal. On one side it is outside, on the other side it was inside, being overlapped by the next one. And such a type of aestivation, twisted aestivation, can be seen in China rose, lady's finger and cotton flower. Okay. Next, imbricate aestivation. In imbricate aestivation also you see overlapping, but it does not happen in a specific particular direction like it happens in twisted aestivation. Over here you can see how some petals like this one are both inside. On both the margins it is inside. There are some petals which are on both the margins outside. And there are some petals or sepals that are half in, half out. This is half out, half in. This is in, out. And this is in, out. So there is no exact specific direction in which overlapping happens like in twisted. Overlapping is there, but it doesn't happen in any particular direction. Some of them are entirely outside on both margins, some of them are entirely inside both margins, some of them are half in, half out, okay. So the margins of petals or sepals do overlap, but not in any particular direction. Okay, this can be seen in the case of Calcea and Gulmohar. Okay, now last type of aestivation. This is characteristic feature of the pea family. You can see this type of aestivation in the petals of members belonging to pea family like peas, beans and all of that. So here typically you have five petals. The 5 petals vary in size. There is one very large petal that is called the standard or vexillum. This large petal will overlap to smaller petals like this. This large petal on both sides is outside. It's overlapping 2 smaller petals here. These 2 smaller petals are called lateral wings. Okay, so this is 1, you have 2 and 3 here. You have 2 more that are even smaller than the wings. These wings are overlapped by the, these smaller petals are overlapped by the wings and they are fused. The fusion is represented like this. Now these are called the keel petals. They are fused. And these keel petals are present at the anterior side. Remember that. One large petal, standard or vexillum, because it's called vexillum, this is called vexillary aestivation. This is the largest petal. You can see it here. There will be one very large petal. Okay. This large petal will overlap relatively 2 smaller petals that are called wings. These 2 small petals further overlap even 2 smaller petals called the keel petal, and those 2 keel petals will be fused, and the large petal is at the posterior end and this is at the anterior end. Okay. Since the petals of this flower resemble the shape of butterflies, right? It does look like butterflies, doesn't it? That's why this corolla is called papilionaceous corolla, which means it is like butterfly. Papilionaceous means butterfly-like. Okay, now we'll move on to talk about Androecium. That's all about sepals and petals. Androecium. The units of Androecium are called stamens. Stamens have 2 parts. It has a long slender filament that you can see here. One end of the filament, it will be attached to the thalamus. On the other end, it will bear a broad knob-like structure which is called the anther. It is within the anther that the pollen grains will get produced. Okay. Generally, this anther will have 2 lobes, as you can see here, 1 and 2 lobes, they are held together. Because it has 2 lobes, we say that the anther is bilobed. In each lobe, you will have 2 pollen chambers within which pollen grains are produced. More about this you'll learn in the chapter Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants. For now, just remember the parts of the stamen. And sometimes a stamen will not be fertile. It will not have the ability to produce pollen grains. In that case, we call it the staminode. I told you, I mentioned staminate earlier. Now I'm mentioning staminode. Both of them sound very similar, but they are 2 entirely different things. Staminate is when a flower has only stamen. Staminode is a stamen that is sterile, not functional, not capable of producing pollen grains. Okay, so there's a difference. Now, sometimes the stamens may be fused with other whorls such as petals or tepals. In that case, we will have specific terms to specify that. Whenever stamen has fused with the petals, when it is attached to the petals, we call it epipetalous condition. Epi means above. If this is a petal and the stamen is fused to it, it's on the petal, then we call it epipetalous. If it is fused with a tepal or the perianth, then we call it epiphyllous. Okay. So if it's fused or attached to the perianth, you call it epiphyllous. You can see that in monocot plants like lily. In brinjal, you can see epipetalous condition. This is stamen being fused or united with members of other worlds. But stamens can get united within themselves also. Okay, that is called adelphi. Whenever stamens are free, you call that polyandrous condition, like polysepalous, polypetalous. This is polyandrous when they are free and not fused. Whenever the filaments are fused and anthers are free, you call it adelphous. In case of China rose or hibiscus, you see that how many ever stamens are present, all of their filaments are fused to form a tube, one single bundle, and the anthers are free. Whenever the stamens are fusing to form one bundle, we call it monoadelphous condition. Mono means one, adelphi means I already told you. Monoadelphous means the filaments of all the anthers fusing to form one bundle. Diadelphous condition, you will have two bundles. This can be seen in the case of pea plant. In pea plant, you will have a total of 10 stamens. Of the 10 stamens, 9 will be fused to form one bundle, 1 will be separate. We will consider this as two bundles. Okay, so you can see here, 9 have fused to form this structure, 1 is separate. This is called diadelphous condition. Polyadelphous means more than 2 bundles have formed. This you can see in the case of citrus plants. Okay, so here you can see there are many bundles that have formed. Next. You can classify stamens based on the length of the stamen. In many plants, the stamen length will be uniform. There are some species in which the length of the stamen varies. There is a plant called salvia in which the stamens total number will be 4. Of the 4 stamens, 2 will be short, 2 will be long. Such a condition is called didynamous condition. Didynamous means you have 4 stamens in total. I want you to notice how 2 of them are long and 2 of them are short in comparison. That is called diadelphous condition. You can also find something similar, variation in the length of stamens, in mustard also. In mustard, you have a total of 6 stamens. Among the 6 stamens, 4 are long, 2 are short. We call this tetradynamous condition. The 2 short ones are present towards the outside wall and the long ones, 4 ones, are present inside. Okay, when we study the mustard family of Brassicaceae, you will understand about this. This condition where there are 6 stamens and 4 are long and 2 are short is called tetradynamous condition. When there is a total 4, 2 are long, 2 are short, you call it didynamous condition. Okay, now that's about Androecium. Let's talk about the gynoecium. Gynoecium, as we already know, is the female reproductive part. Gynecologist, female doctor, right? Gyno itself relates to female. In a gynoecium, you will have 3 parts. You will have this stigma, which is the part that receives the pollen grains, receptive part. Here you have the style that connects the stigma to the bottom part, which is called the ovary. This ovary inside has a chamber that is called the locule. Ovaries will have cushiony tissue which is called the placenta. To this placenta, ovules will be attached. Okay. So, different species, the number of ovules will be different. The way in which the ovules are arranged also will be different. Okay. So, some ovaries in some species have only one ovule. In some species of plants, you will have many ovules. After sexual reproduction, ovary becomes the fruit, ovule becomes the seed. Okay. Yeah. Next, based on how many carpels are present, you can further classify ovary. If it has only one carpel, we call it monocarpellary. Mono means one. If it has only one carpel. If it has more than one carpel, then you call it multicarpellary. Multi means very obvious, many. Whenever there is more than one, it may be free or it may be fused. If it is free, we call it apocarpus. If it is fused, we call it syncarpus. Example for apocarpus is lotus and rose. Example for syncarpus is tomato and mustard. Okay. Now, let's talk about placentation. Placentation is basically how the ovules are arranged within the ovary on the placenta. Remember I told you this cushiony structure here is called the placenta. To the placenta ovules are attached, right? So in different species, the mode of attachment of ovules to the placenta will be different. So that study of arrangement of ovules within the ovary is what we refer to as placentation. It's an important concept. There are 5 different types of placentation: marginal, axial, parietal, free central and basal. We'll understand each of these one by one. Starting with marginal placentation. Marginal placentation you may have seen in peas. If you've ever, used or helped your mother in cooking, you would have noticed how the pea seeds are arranged in a pea pod. Here in marginal placentation, the placenta is present on the ventral side. Okay, so this is the dorsal side, this is the ventral side. On the ventral side, it forms a ridge, like a slight, like a slightly elevated region. You know what a suture is? Suture is the joint. When two things are coming together, a joint forms, that is called the suture. You have 2 parts in a pea pod. Those 2 parts come together on the ventral side, that is called the ventral suture. At the ventral suture, the placenta is present and the placenta forms a ridge, like a slight elevation, slightly elevated region, that is called a ridge. Okay. On this ventral placenta, which forms a ridge, ovules are attached in 2 rows. Okay, so if you open this and see, you will see ovules will be attached in 1 row here, 1 row here. Okay. Placenta, what does it do? It forms a ridge. Where does it form a ridge? On the ventral suture of the ovary. Ovules are born on this in 2 rows. Okay, that is marginal placentation. Next we have axial placentation. The moment you look at this diagram, I'm sure you will think about tomato and lemon. When you cut a lemon, this is how the seeds are arranged, right? So why is this called axial placentation? Here you have a central axis. This is the central axis. Okay. If you look at the ovary here, we have taken a transverse section of the ovary. Here there are many, septa present. These are called septa. Because inside the ovary many septa are present, ovary is divided into many chambers. Because ovary has many chambers, more than one chamber, we say that the ovary is multilocular. So here you have a multilocular ovary with a central axis. The reason this ovary is multilocular is because of the presence of these septa. To the central axis, you can see how the ovules are attached. Okay, even in orange and lemon, you see this kind of placentation. This is called axial placentation. Next, we have parietal placentation. In parietal placentation, you can see this in mustard and argemony. Okay, in parietal placentation, what happens is, this is the wall of the ovary and the ovules are attached to the inner wall of the ovary. If this is the wall of the ovary, this is the outer wall and towards the inside is the inner wall. Towards the inner wall, peripherally, you can see the attachment of ovules. Initially, when you look at it, this ovary seems like it has a single chamber. It looks like it's unilocular. But eventually, during development, what happens is a false septum will form. That false septum will form and that septum is called the repulum. Because of the formation of this repulum, the unilocular ovary will become 2-chambered. Okay, ovules develop on the inner wall of the ovary. Ovary is initially one-chambered, but due to the formation of a false septum called repulum, it will become two-chambered. You can see this in mustard and argemony. In free central placentation, that looks very similar to axial placentation. This also has a central axis, but the difference between that and this is that previously you saw there were septa present and it was multilocular. Here there is no septa present. It is a unilocular ovary. There is a central axis on which the ovules are born. Okay. This can be seen in the case of dianthus and primrose. Last one is basal placentation. You can see this in sunflower and marigold. So far, all of the sections that you saw were transverse sections. The first one is not transverse, it is longitudinal, and this also is a longitudinal section. When you cut it longitudinally, the ovary, you can see that the ovule is attached to the base of the ovary. So, you call it basal placentation. Generally, per ovary, only one single ovule will be attached in basal placentation. So, here I have given the different diagrams for placentation and also the corresponding examples. You will get this in your notes. You can study the examples easier. Okay. Now, we've spoken about flower. Everything about flower is over. We have to talk about the fruit and seed. What is a fruit? Fruit is a fertilized ovary. After fertilization, ovary itself will develop into the fruit. Okay. Sometimes fruits form without fertilization also. In such cases, seeds will not form, and such fruits are called parthenocarpic fruits if they form without fertilization. But generally fruits are formed with fertilization. If it is formed after fertilization, it will have seeds. If it is formed without fertilization, it will not have seeds. They will be seedless fruits. Seedless fruits can form naturally or it can be induced by application of plant growth regulators as well. More about it as we move on in other chapters you will learn. Now in a fruit, you will have two parts. You will have the outer fruit wall and you will have the seed. The outer fruit wall is called the pericarp. Peri means around, carp means fruit. Around the outer wall of the fruit, which formed from the wall of the ovary, that is called the pericarp. Inside that, what do we have? We have the seed. And this pericarp can further be divided into three different layers. An outer epicarp, epi means I told you out. Middle means mesocarp and innermost endocarp. You have to learn about one type of fruit which is called a drupe. Example for drupe, you have mango and coconut. In mango, the outer leathery layer, the peel of the mango, that is the epicarp. The fleshy part that we consume, that is the mesocarp. Inner stony part is the endocarp. In coconut, if you look at tender coconut, the outer leathery green color layer in the tender coconut, that is the epicarp. The fibrous layer in between that we remove, that is the mesocarp. The inner hard part, that is the endocarp. Okay. So, how do drupes develop? They develop from ovaries that are monocarpillary and superior. They have only one seeds. So, drupes are one-seeded fruits that develop from an ovary that is superior, which means the flower is hypogynous and it had only one carpel. Next, we have to learn about seeds. About seeds, we are going to learn extensively in detail in sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So, I will tell you briefly what a seed is and what its parts are. How does a seed form? When the flower transforms into the fruit, when the ovary transforms into the fruit, the ovules within the ovary will transform into the seed. Okay? Seeds are of two types depending upon how many cotyledons are present. In some seeds, within some seeds, two cotyledons will be present, within some only one will be present. If two cotyledons are present, we call it dicotyledonous seeds. If one cotyledon is present, we call it monocotyledonous seeds. Okay? First, we learn about the structure of dicot seed, then we will focus on monocot seed. So, in a seed, you will have some parts. Outer protective covering will be there, that is called the seed coat. Okay? So in a dicot seed, you will have the seed coat, which is the outermost covering. In the seed coat, there will be two layers. The outer layer is called the testa and the inner layer is called the tegmen. More about this you will learn in the chapter Sexual Reproduction in Flowering Plants. There will be a scar called the hilum. You may have noticed this kind of scar present in black-eyed peas and all of that. Okay, so this hilum is a scar. What does this hilum signify? You know that these seeds used to be ovules, right? So ovules were attached to the placenta. The point at which the ovule was attached to the placenta is what the hilum represents. That will be seen as a scar even in the seed, and that is called the hilum. Okay, and there will be a small opening, very small opening present in the seeds, that is called the micropyle. Now this micropyle allows exchange of gases, absorption of water during germination. So micropyle is important. Now let's talk about the embryo. You know that the seed is the baby of the plant. From the seed only the next generation of plants will germinate and come. So within the seed there should be like a future plant already present, right? That part of the seed, that part which is present within the seed, which the seed coats are protecting, is the embryo. Embryo is going to give rise to the future plant. And in the embryo in dicots, you can find the presence of two cotyledons. Okay, this is what is present inside this. Of course, whenever you've tried to peel out the seed coat in these dicotyledonous seeds, you would have seen two of these parts. These are the cotyledons. You can find the cotyledons and you can also find an embryonal axis. Okay, so this is the embryonal axis. To one point on the embryonal axis, the two cotyledons will be attached. The part of the embryonal axis above this point of attachment is called the epicotyle, and the part below it is called the hypocotyle. At the tip of the epicotyle, you have a structure called the plumule that will give rise to the shoot system. And at the tip of the hypocotyle, you will have radicle. Radicle will give rise to the root system. Remember, I told you when we spoke about root and stem, I told you that radicle gives rise to the roots and the plumule gives rise to the shoot system. So that is what you see in the embryo here. Okay, so this embryo is present within the seed coat. Embryo has two main parts. It has two cotyledons and it has the embryonal axis. The cotyledons basically store a lot of reserve food. That is why it is fleshy in nature. At the tips of the embryonal axis, you have the plumule and the radicle. I have already told you about it. Now, within the seed, dicot seed, endosperm will be present. Okay. Now, this endosperm would have formed after fertilization. How exactly it forms, what is its nature, all of that we'll learn in another chapter. For now, just understand, endosperm is a nutritive tissue. When this embryo has to develop within the seed, it requires nourishment because the seed itself is not photosynthesizing, it does not have leaves yet. So, in order to help the embryo develop, the nourishment is obtained from the endosperm. As the embryo develops, becomes bigger and bigger, the endosperm quantity keeps going down. Okay, endosperm is like the food for the embryo. For development of embryo, endosperm will get used up. So, at maturity, in some seeds, endosperm will be fully used up. You won't see any endosperm retained within the seed. But in some species, you can see that the endosperm is present even at maturity. Depending upon whether endosperm is present or absent, you can categorize seeds into two types, endospermic and non-endospermic. So, non-endospermic seeds, as the name itself indicates, will not have endosperm at maturity, but endospermic seeds will have endosperm at maturity. Generally, majority of the dicots are non-endospermic. Very rarely you will find endospermic seeds. Some examples for endospermic seed in dicot is castor and beans, peas, gram, all of these, groundnut, all of these are non-endospermic seeds. Okay. Next, monocot seed. Monocot seed also has a seed coat. Seed coat is the outermost covering, but what happens in monocots is the seed coat would have fused with the fruit wall. The fruit wall and the seed coat would have fused, so you can't really separate them out from each other. Even within monocot seed, you will find the embryo and the endosperm. In the embryo, since it's a monocot plant, monocot seed, there will be only one cotyledon. If this is the seed, at one corner you can find the embryo. This is the embryo. Whatever I am shading or outlining in blue color, this large shield-shaped single cotyledon, that is called the scutellum. This is the embryonal axis. At the tip of the embryonal axis, at one end you will have the plumule, which will give rise to the shoot system. At the other end you will have the radicle, which will give rise to the Root system. The plumule is covered by a sheath called the coleoptile. The radicle is covered by an undifferentiated sheath called the coleorhiza. Okay, that's about the embryo. Now, endosperm. In majority of the monocots, endosperm will be persistent even at maturity. Of course, even there you have exceptions. What I am outlining in red color is the endosperm. The endosperm outermost layer here is called alluron layer. This is proteinaceous in nature. Layer. What you have inside is made up of starch. So you call this the starchy endosperm. Even here it is nutritive in function. Excuse me. Next, talking about endosperm, it may be present, may not be present. In most cases in monocots it will be present. Example for endospermic seed you see in maize. Non-endospermic, rare in monocots, but in orchids you don't find endosperm at maturity. Okay, so that's about seeds. So far we've learned in detail about, we started off with root, then we spoke about the types of root, modifications and all that, then we did stem, leaves, inflorescence, flower, different parts of a flower, fruit and seed, different morphological variations in each of these plant parts we have studied. What we have to study next is, if you have a plant and if you have to describe that plant technically using biological terms, what is the right way to do it? You cannot say the flowers are pink in color, the petals are fused, the petals are free. Instead of that, we've learnt a lot of terms up until this point, right? We've learnt about monoadelphous, polyadelphous, polypetalous, gamosepalous, different terms, tetradynamous, didynamous. By using these terms, how can you describe a plant semi-technically? So that is what we will have to learn, okay? And after this, we will learn about floral formula and floral diagram. So in a semi-technical description of a flowering plant, what do we consider? Basically, we describe all of the morphological features very briefly, not in paragraphs, very briefly using small terms and in a particular order, okay, in an orderly manner. We always start with the habit. Is it a herb, shrub or tree? We always start with the root, and in whatever order we've learnt the different parts of a plant, root, stem, leaf, inflorescence, flower, fruit, seed, in the exact same order we will have to describe the plant, okay? So first it will be habit, then it will be vegetative characters like the root, stem, leaves, then floral characters, inflorescence, flower, fruit, seed, then floral formula and floral diagram, okay? Now what is a floral formula? This heading is wrong. This is not floral diagram. This is floral formula. Okay. In a floral formula, for different characters, we represent different characters by using different symbols or letters. Okay. Let's understand what are the different symbols and letters that we use. Starting with bracts. Floral formula, obviously we are talking about the different structural variations in a flower. In a flower, a bract may be present, may not be present. If it's present, it's called bracteate. If it's absent, it's called ebracteate. If a flower has a bract, we represent it as BR. Capital B and lowercase r. If it doesn't have it, it is EBR. Calyx is represented by capital letter K. Now, if a flower has 5 sepals and the 5 sepals are not fused, you will write it as K subscript 5. N represents the number of sepals here. If it is fused, if it is gamosepalous, you will write K subscript 5 and close it within brackets. Likewise, for corolla, you represent letter C. The number of petals in that corolla will be the subscript. If it is free, there is no bracket. If it is fused, if it is in a gamopetalous condition, you will add brackets. Some plants like lily, you don't have sepals and petals separate. You have something called the perianth. The units of perianth are called tepals. Now these tepals may be free, it may be fused. If they are free, you will write it as a subscript, the number of tepals and no brackets. If it is fused, there will be brackets. Androecium, represented by capital letter A. The subscript N represents the number of stamens. If there is any sort of fusion, you will write it within brackets. If there is no fusion, it will just be the number. Sometimes Androecium is fused with petals or tepals or the perianth, then we call it epipetalous or epiphyllous condition. In that case, from A to C, there should be an arch drawn like this if it is epipetalous, because C represents corolla or petals, A represents Androecium. This indicates that there is some fusion between these two. P represents perianth, A represents Androecium. So if you're drawing an arch like that, that represents the members of this and this are showing some fusion. Okay. Next, gynoecium is represented by capital letter G. Same thing given here. The number of carpels are represented as a subscript. If it is apocarpus, no bracket. If it is syncarpus, you will enclose it within bracket. If it is a inferior ovary, ovary is inferior, flower is epigynous, ovary is the lowest position. On top of ovary, you will draw a dash. Okay, so this is wrong here. For inferior ovary, line should be here on top, not at the bottom. Okay, because ovary occupies the lowest position here. If ovary occupies the highest position, if the ovary is superior, you will draw a line below it. If it is half inferior, then it will be like this on the side. Whenever a flower is actinomorphic or radially symmetrical, you draw a circle and within the circle there will be a plus. If it is zygomorphic or bilaterally symmetrical, you draw percentage. If it is bisexual, you will draw this symbol. Everybody knows the symbol for bisexual. If it is unisexual, if it is staminate, this will be the symbol. If it is pistillate, this will be the symbol. Okay, so these are some of the symbols that we use in a floral formula. Now let's understand the floral diagram. What is a floral diagram? In a floral diagram, you can see how the different parts of a flower in the different whorls are arranged with respect to each other. We all know that in flowers, the outermost whorl is calyx. Inside that we have the corolla. Inside the corolla there is androecium, and inside that there is the gynoecium. How are these whorls present? In the calyx, how many sepals are there? In the corolla, how many petals are there? In the androecium, how many stamens are there? Are they arranged in one whorl or two whorls? Is there any fusion between the stamen and the petals? How are the ovules arranged in the ovary? What is the kind of placentation? All of this you can make out from just the floral diagram. So it gives us information about a lot of things. Just like the formula gives us information about a couple of things related to the flower, the floral diagram also gives us some information. What information can we gather by looking at the floral diagram? So, number of parts of a flower. So, this for example is the floral diagram of the floral family Brassicaceae or cruciferae, which includes the mustard. So, here you can see number of parts of a flower. Outermost whorl represented in green color. This one is the calyx. So, you can see how there is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sepals. You can see how many petals are there. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 petals are there. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stamens. So in each part of the flower, how many members are present? That is something that you can make out. How is their arrangement with respect to each other? By looking at just this, you can say the type of aestivation, the type of placentation. All of that you can make out by looking at the floral diagram. The relation they have with one another. Same thing again. What is the kind of arrangement of petals, what is the kind of arrangement of sepals, what is the placentation, is there any fusion between different parts of a flower, all of that we can make out. Yeah, same thing, cohesion and adhesion within parts of whorls and in between whorls, all of this you can make out. Now, if you look at a floral diagram, in every floral diagram, just like one big bindi, you have one dot here. This basically represents the mother axis. Now, what does the mother axis mean? You know, this is kind of like a cross section of the flower, giving us details about how the different whorls are arranged. This mother axis represents the axis from which the flower is born. For example, if you take this flower here, this is the floral axis because this flower is arising from here. So with respect to this floral axis, how are the different parts in this flower arranged? Let's say there are 5 sepals. One sepal is right here, 2 sepals are on the side and 2 sepals is in the front. So while you're drawing the floral diagram, you will draw it with respect to this floral axis or the mother axis itself. So regardless of which flower or floral diagram you're drawing, in all those flowers belonging to one species or one family, you will have the same kind of arrangement. In all of them, if there's one large petal closer to the mother axis, in every one of those flowers, you will have the largest petal there. Okay, so that kind of gives us information about how is the flower arranged and the parts of the flower arranged with respect to the mother axis. Okay, so that is called the mother axis. The position of the mother axis is with respect to the flower. It is represented by a dot on top of the floral diagram. Yeah, so like I already mentioned, calyx, corolla, Androecium, gynoecium, it is drawn in a series of successive whorls just like it is in the flower. Okay. Now, we have to learn about many different angiosperm families. I've already told you. You have to learn about Brassicaceae, Fabaceae, Poaceae, Asteraceae and Leguminosae. No wait, which one? Malvaceae. Yeah, these are the 5 families. Of this, for Brassicaceae, not much information is given in NCERT. You just have this floral formula, this floral diagram given in NCERT. This is the floral diagram of family Brassicaceae. Brassicaceae includes mustard. Okay, we saw in all of the concepts that we've studied so far that mustard is mentioned many times, right? We saw that mustard was mentioned in tetradynamous condition. So mustard has been mentioned in actinomorphic flower. So we know and I think it is tetrameris. So you know about mustard briefly. Now we have to learn about the detailed study of family Brassicaceae, which also includes mustard. As always, when we are studying a particular angiosperm family, when you're trying to describe an angiosperm family, we will always start with the habit and then move on to vegetative characters and then to floral characters. Let's start with the distribution and habit. Brassicaceae is also called cruciferae. In common terms, it is mustard family. It includes mustard. This is the most popular plant in this family. Okay. So distribution, members belonging to this family can be seen across the globe. So worldwide you can see its distribution. Habit, whether it's a herb, shrub or tree, you don't see trees here. Mostly they are very small herbs and shrubs. Okay. Similar to the mustard plant. Everybody knows the mustard plant, right? In DDLJ, Shah Rukh Khan plays that whatever instrument in a field containing yellow flowers. That is the mustard flower and that is the mustard field. So yeah, that's the plant. Vegetative characters. Since it's a dicotyledonous family, it will have taproot system. Stem is generally erect. That means above ground. It's not prostrate. It's erect. It will have some hair present on its surface and it's a solid stem, not a hollow stem like bamboo. It is a solid stem. Talking about the leaves. How is the phyllotaxy? You can see alternate phyllotaxy. Remember, I gave you mustard as an example for alternate phyllotaxy along with China rose, right? And sunflower. So, in leaves, you see alternate phyllotaxy. They are simple leaves. Very rarely in some species, they may be compound. Remember here, we are using mustard as an example for mustard family of Brassicaceae. It doesn't mean that every member in the Brassicaceae family will have to be like mustard. There are many species included under this family. So some of these species or most of these species will show simple type of leaf, whereas some species very rarely can show compound leaves as well. Exstipulate means stipules are absent. Since it is dicotyledonous plant, it's obvious that it will have reticulate venation. And the leaves here are sessile. That means there is no stalk. They don't have a petiole. Okay. Next, talking about the floral characters. Inflorescence is of racemose type. Flower does not have a bract, so we call it ebracteate. It does have a pedicel, so it's pedicellate. It has both androecium and gynoecium within the same flower. We saw that in the floral diagram as well. So it is bisexual. It is radially symmetrical, so we say that it is actinomorphic. It has 4 sepals and 4 petals, so we call it tetramerous. Talking about individual parts of a flower, calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium. Calyx has 4 sepals, the sepals are free, so you call it polysepalous. And you can see imbricate aestivation in the sepals. Corolla, petals are 4 in number, it is polypetalous, no fusion among the petals. It has long claw-like structures, the petals when you remove them it will have claw-like structures, and in the petals you can see valvate aestivation. Okay. Next, Androecium. We already know about the Androecium of mustard. It has a total of 6 stamens. There is variation in the length. Of the 6 stamens, 4 of them are long and 2 of them are short. The 2 shorter ones are present in a separate whorl. The 4 longer ones are present in a separate whorl. Okay. So, in Androecium, you can see that the stamens are 6 in number, they are not fused, so you can say they are polyandrous, they are arranged in 2 whorls, tetradynamous, which means outer 2 are short and the inner 4 are long. Gynoecium, it has 2 carpels, so we call it bicarpellary. Since it is fused, we call it syncarpous. Both the carpels have fused and inside you don't have any septa, you have just one locule, so it's unilocular. Over here you can see that the seeds are arranged on the inner wall of the ovary peripherally, so you call this parietal placentation. The style over here is very short in length and the stigma is bilobed. The stigma is bilobed means it will be like this. If this is the style, this is the stigma. The stigma will have 2 lobes like this. So you call it bilobed. The fruits here are called calyx. And you have many seeds that are non-endospermous. We studied mustard seed as an example of non-endosperm dicot seed as well, if you remember, right? So that's about your mustard. Mustard family characters. Now let's look at its floral formula and floral diagram. We learned that it is actinomorphic. It's represented by this formula. It is bisexual. This is the formula. This represents calyx. As you can see here, this is a wrong floral diagram. The correct floral diagram is there. I showed you earlier. This is not correct. This is floral diagram of Solanaceae. By mistake, this has been added here. Okay, so let me change this. For Brassicaceae, we have floral formula and the floral diagram. I will show it to you in another slide. Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah. So here you can see the floral formula. This symbol here represents that it is actinomorphic. This represents that it is bisexual. This represents that the calyx is present in 2 whorls. We saw that here in the Brassicaceae family, the calyx was present in 2 whorls, right? So here is the outer whorl. This is the outer whorl. Well, never mind. Yeah. This one and this one here is present in the outer whorl. This one and this one are present on the inner whorl. So they are arranged in 2 whorls. That's why we write it as 2 plus 2. Since there is no fusion here, if at all there is any fusion, these lines would be joined here. These margins would be joined. But they are not showing any fusion here, which means it is polysepalous. There is no fusion. So you will write 2 plus 2 and it's not enclosed within brackets. Now let's look at corolla. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 are present and they are all present in the same whorl. So you will write C with a subscript 4 not enclosed within brackets. Look at the Androecium. You have 2 whorls. On the outer whorl, you have 2. On the inner whorl, you have 4. Right? So you will write it as 2 plus 4. Inside you have the gynoecium. There is 1 carpel and 2 carpel. Here there is fusion. So gynoecium you will write 2 and enclose it within brackets. Okay, so that's how the floral formula will be. So this indicates calyx. Since it has 2 whorls, you are writing 2 plus 2. C indicates corolla. You have 4 not, fused, so no bracket. Androecium, there's 6 stamens totally, 2 whorls, outer 2 short, inner 4 long. So this is tetradynamous condition. And in gynoecium, you see that it had 2 carpels and the 2 carpels were fused. Bicarpellary syncarpous condition. You can also see that there is a line under G. What does that indicate? That indicates that it has a superior ovary, which means the flower is epigynous. Alright, so that's about family Brassicaceae. Now let's learn about some economic importance of this family. Many of the vegetables that we use on a daily basis belong to family Cruciferae. So you have radish, cabbage, mustard, cauliflower, broccoli, all of these belong to the same family. Edible oil, mustard oil is used for cooking. I think especially in West Bengal and those states they use mustard oil a lot. Some flowers, some plants like dame's violet, candy tuft and spider flower, they produce very pretty flowers, so it can be used as ornamental plants as well. If at all any question is asked from Brassicaceae, it's more likely going to be about the floral characters. Very rarely question can be asked from economic importance. In fact, this is not even part of your NCERT. So it's highly unlikely for questions to be asked from economic importance and such things. It's more likely for questions to appear from floral characters, basically floral diagram, floral formula. In any family, you should always remember what are the distinguishing features. For example, in mustard, the most distinguishing feature is that you have a tetradynamous condition, which you do not see in other families, right? So that is a characteristic feature for mustard family. So that is one thing that you should remember about mustard family or Brassicaceae. Like that, in every family you will have some characteristic features. It's likely for questions to be asked from such characteristic features of families which you don't see in other families. Okay. Now let's move on and learn about the second family today, which is Fabaceae or Leguminosae. We've learnt about so many examples in the course of this chapter where peas, beans and all of that was mentioned. We learnt that pea has a pulvinous leaf base, and then we learnt it has marginal placentation. We learnt that it has non-endospermic seeds. We also learnt that it produces leaf tendrils. So we already know a lot about the pea plant, right? And also vexillary aestivation. So these are characteristic features of pea plants. Let's learn more about it. This is known as Fabaceae and Leguminosae. Fabaceae is there in your NCERT textbook, but in the NEET syllabus, it is mentioned as Leguminosae. It's the same thing. Earlier, it was also called Papilionoideae. Remember, I told you that the corolla in pea family, it is called papilionaceous because the shape is like butterfly. That's why it's called Papilionoideae. The species belonging to Fabaceae is distributed throughout the world. Generally, they are herbs and shrubs. Very rarely you can see trees as well. Now talking about its vegetative character, since it's a dicotyledonous family, obviously it will have taproot system. And taproot system, sometimes, there is association of nitrogen fixing bacteria, rhizobium, with the roots of leguminous plants like peas and beans. So in such cases, it will form nodule-like structures. So in the taproot system, nodules may be present. Stem is erect, can be erect, or it can be a climber. We learned how pea plant has leaf modified to form tendrils because it is a climber, right? So it may be erect or it may be a climber. How are the leaves? Alternate phyllotaxy you can see here. They may be simple, or in some cases they may show pinnate compound leaves as well. Leaf base is pulvinate. We've already learnt about this earlier, right? So remember this. This is a characteristic feature that you should remember. They don't have stipules, so it's exstipulate. Since it's dicot, it's obvious that it has reticulate venation. Some things are obvious. Having a taproot system, having reticulate venation, you don't have to put much thought into it. You know it's a dicotyledonous plant. It's obvious that it will have taproot system and reticulate venation, right? Next, talking about its floral characters, inflorescence is racemose. In a pea plant, we saw how it had both Androecium and gynoecium. Pea plant was also an example for zygomorphic flower. So in pea, you see that the flower is bisexual and zygomorphic. Talking about individual calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium. Calyx, you have 5 sepals and the sepals have fused, so it is gamosepalous. Aestivation may be valvate or imbricate. Now when I say it may be valvate or imbricate, it's not like in the same species, once it decides to be valvate and another time it decides to be imbricate. It doesn't work like that. Some species always show valvate aestivation and some species you can see imbricate aestivation. Talking about corolla, this is a characteristic feature that you see in members belonging to Fabaceae. You have vexillary aestivation. Petals are 5 in number, they are polypetalous, they are papilionaceous, which means butterfly-like. So you have a posterior petal, standard petal, and 2 lateral wings and 2 anterior keel petals, and you can see vexillary aestivation. This is characteristic feature of pea family that you should not forget. Another characteristic feature of pea family is that it has diadelphous condition. I told you there is a total of 10 stamens, 9 of them form one bundle and the other one remains separately. So that diadelphous condition also is a characteristic feature of pea plant that you should remember. Next, gynoecium. Ovary is superior, monocarpellary, has a single carpel, unilocular ovary. You know within the ovary there is only one chamber. When you look at the fruit you can easily make out. And it has many ovules, obviously, because within a pea pod or within a beans you can see many seeds are there. So many ovules will be present and the style is single. Fruits are called legumes. That's why we call these plants as leguminous plants, because the fruit that they produce is called a legume. And here, gynoecium, I think we've missed marginal placentation. I'll write it down here. Seeds. 1 to many seeds you can see, and they are non-endospermic. We've learnt about bean seeds and pea seed being non-endospermic already, so this is not something new. Okay, you have to relate what you've learnt before, where all you've learnt about examples for pea and bean. That makes your study of this family easier. Now let's look at its floral formula and floral diagram. This is what the floral diagram of a pea plant looks like, or Fabaceae family looks like. This is the floral diagram. We already know that it's zygomorphic, so we are representing it with the percentage symbol. It is bisexual. You have Androecium and gynoecium within the same flower, so you have bisexual. The sepals are fused. There are 5 sepals, K subscript 5 enclosed within brackets. Coming to corolla, this is important here, how you write it in the floral diagram. Here you see vexillary aestivation. You have one large petal that is represented as 1. This is overlapping 2 relatively smaller lateral wings. So you write +2, and within that you have 2 smaller ones that are fused. The fusion is represented like this. Okay, I want you to notice how previously in the floral diagram that we saw, there was no joining between 2 sepals. That indicated that that was polysepalous. Here you see that it's joined. So it indicates that it's gamosepalous. Here this joint between this petal and this petal indicates that it's fused. So since 2 petals here are fused, you will write it within brackets. Even Androecium is important to note here, because you can see diadelphous condition. You have a total of 10 stamens. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 of them have fused to form one bundle. So you write 9 within brackets, and 1 is separate, so you write it as +1. Gynoecium, there's only one carpel, there is only one locule, so you will write it as 1. If there's only one, there's no point of fusion or free. Only when there's more than one, you have to think about whether it's fused or free, right? So there is a line below G which indicates that the flower is hypogynous and the superior and the ovary is superior, right? Talking about the economic importance of Fabaceae, many of the pulses, all of the pulses that we consume, all our dal and pulses are from Fabaceae. Gram, arhar, moong dal, soybean, beans, kidney beans, rajma, all of these belong to the same family. We get a lot of edible oils also from this family. Soybean oil, groundnut oil, dyes like indigofera it is a blue color dye, obviously indigofera, indigo is blue color, that is used to dye the hair and it's used to dye clothes. I'm sure you've seen clothes that are dyed using indigo, like handloom fabrics like kurtas and bags and saris, you get all of that. Fibers from sun hemp fibers are obtained for commercial purposes. Sesbania and trifolium are used as fodder for animals. Lupin and sweet pea are ornamental plants because they produce very pretty butterfly-like flowers. And mulethi is used, it has medicinal value. I'm sure you've seen many things that have mulethi as one of the ingredients in them. So it has medicinal value and it's used in Ayurveda. Okay, so these are some economic importance of the family Fabaceae. What do we have next? Next on our list is family Malvaceae. Malvaceae is also called mallow family or hibiscus family. If you remember, we've studied hibiscus or China rose also multiple times as an example for various things. Okay, so we will recollect all of them now. Distribution all of the world, they could be herbs, shrubs or trees. Next, how is the root? It's a dicot family, so obviously taproot system. How is the stem? It's erect, it's branched and generally it's cylindrical. How are the leaves? Alternate. As an example for alternate leaf, we studied about China rose or hibiscus, so obviously it has alternate. Leaves are simple, they have a petiole, stipules are present. Since it's a dicot family, obviously the venation will be reticulate. Now, floral characters. Generally, remember I told you it's a solitary cyme. So generally it is cymose or solitary. The flower does show the presence of bracts sometimes in some species, or some species may be ebracteate as well. The flower is hypogynous. It is actinomorphic, which means it's radially symmetrical. It clearly has a pedicel, so it is pedicellate. It has both the sexes, so it's bisexual. It has sepals and petals in multiples of 5, so it is pentamerous. Here in this family, along with the calyx, you have something called epicalyx. What I'm highlighting here right now is epicalyx. What you're looking at here is calyx. Okay, so this epicalyx lies below the calyx and its number varies from one species to another between 3 and 8. So this is one characteristic feature that you could remember about Malvaceae family. Calyx has 5 sepals and as you can clearly see they are fused, so it is gamosepalous and it shows valvate aestivation. The number of petals is 5 and they are free, so it is polypetalous. You can see twisted aestivation in the petals. Valvate in calyx, twisted in petals. Androecium, I'm sure all of you have seen the stamens in China rose plant. You know how it is example for monoadelphous condition also. All of the filaments of the numerous stamens that you have fused to form one bundle, one tube within which the style will be present. The anthers will be free. So that is called monoadelphous condition. So Androecium are numerous, many are there, you can't count them, and it shows monoadelphous condition and it may be epipetalous in some species. And gynoecium, it is a pentamerous flower. Here you have 5 carpels, they all have fused, so it's syncarpous. It has multilocular ovary. We know that because this is an example for axile placentation. In axile placentations, septa are present and the ovary is multilocular. We already know that. It has a superior ovary and shows axial placentation. The fruit could be a capsule or a schizocarp, and the seeds, because it is a dicot family, will have 2 cotyledons and unusually it is endospermic. In some species it may be non-endospermic as well. Here is how the floral formula and floral diagram looks. It is actinomorphic and bisexual, very clear. Epi represents epicalyx. Its number can vary from 3 to 8. Here the outermost whorl is representing the epicalyx. Okay, so here is the epicalyx. Inside the epicalyx, you have the calyx. This whorl is the calyx. It is showing how there is fusion, right? So it is gamosepalous. It is shown in the form of these joints. If you look at the corolla inside, This whorl represents the corolla. You can see how there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If there are 5 petals, and you can see how they are not fused, there is no joint between the petals. So they are polypetalous. They are showing twisted aestivation. It's very clear. All of the petals are half in and half out. Talking about stamens, there are numerous. All of them have fused to form a bundle, so it is represented as a joint, like a common circle. All of the stamens are connected by this circle, so that means they have all fused. Also, we saw how this is polypetalous. So you can see this line connecting the petals to the androecium, that represents that it is polypetalous. How do you represent this in the floral formula? In the floral formula, whenever there is a polypetalous condition, from the androecium to the petals or the corolla, a line is drawn. Okay, so here we are saying that the calyx is fused and the corolla is free. This should not have these brackets. Okay. All right. Yeah, and the androecium is numerous, so you're not putting a number there, you just write infinity symbol. Gynoecium, depending upon the species, it can vary from 2 to many, but in most cases you see 5 carpels. Okay, so here also we have mentioned that it has 5 carpels. So in the diagram also it is mentioned 5 carpels. You can write it as 5, but when you look at the family, overall in different species belonging to this family, the number of carpels kind of vary, but let's just write it as 5 here. Yeah. All right. So we also know that you have a superior ovary. So a line can be drawn below G. This gives us the floral formula and floral diagram of Malvaceae family. I hope this is clear. Talking about the economic importance, lady's finger or okra, used as a vegetable, belongs to the same family. Cotton, that we obtain fiber from for our clothes, that is from the same family. Hibiscus plant, as we all know, is very pretty. It produces very pretty flowers, so it can be used as an ornamental plant. This is some of the economic importance of the family Malvaceae. What we have to study next is called family Asteraceae or Compositae. So this is commonly called the sunflower family. Its distribution is worldwide. You can see mostly herbs and shrubs in this family, and trees you don't. Talking about the vegetative character, since it's a dicotyledonous family, it's obvious that it will have taproot system. Stem is generally herbaceous, or sometimes it may be woody. It's mostly erect. Rarely it can be climbing, and even rarely it can be an underground stem. How are the leaves? Leaves are, it may be simple or compound. Mostly it's alternate, but very rarely it can be opposite also. It has a petiole, so it's petiolate. It lacks stipules, so it's exstipulate. And since it's a dicot, it will show reticulate venation. Now talking about the most important part of Compositae. The characteristic feature of Compositae is its inflorescence. It's a type of racemose inflorescence which we call the head or capitulum. So all this while you may have thought that sunflower is a flower, but sunflower is not really a flower. What appears like a huge flower is actually many tiny flowers grouped together to form an inflorescence. So whatever you're looking at here, which resembles petals, are they themselves individually tiny flowers that we call florets. So how does this inflorescence form? What happens in racemose inflorescence? You know that in racemose inflorescence, flowers are arranged in acropetal succession. So the oldest flowers will be towards the base, and towards the tip you will have younger flowers. Now imagine that this floral axis, or the stalk of the flower, is called the peduncle. Okay. The stalk of the inflorescence is called the peduncle. So imagine that these regions between flowers become super compressed, super compact, and this whole thing is pressed to become, it's compressed. If all of these segments are condensed, become shorter, what would happen? you would get an inflorescence like this, where the older flowers would be present towards the periphery and the younger flowers would be present at the center. Even in the head or capitulum inflorescence, you have peripherally older flowers, centrally the younger flowers. So it is a type of raceme which we call head or capitulum. Now this inflorescence may be borne at the axils or terminally. Because here the peduncle is compressed like that, it will be flat. Normally, when you look at flowers, flowers have stalks, and at the base of the stalk you find a leaf-like structure which we call the bract. So normally bracts will be present here, right? In this type of inflorescence, what happens is, as the whole floral axis is getting condensed, a lot of bracts form a cup-like structure called involucre of bracts. So when you look at let's say, so let me show you this. This is an example for a Compositae member. This is chrysanthemum. So if you look at the bottom, you have this cup-like green color structure. I'm sure all of you must have seen this flower or this inflorescence, we can call it now. This cup-like thing is actually formed from bracts. But if you look at this flower, generally you tend to think that this is the calyx and this is the corolla, right? Today let's burst that bubble. It's not the calyx and this is not the corolla. What you're looking at here are bracts that have formed a cup-like structure, and we call it the involucre of bracts or involucral bracts. Okay, so all of the bracts form a cup-like structure which we refer to as the involucre. Okay, now over here you can find two different types of flowers. This whole thing is a bunch of flowers. It's an inflorescence. Whatever you're looking at here, the green thing is the bracts, not the calyx. Now here you can you can find two different types of flowers. Since they are super tiny flowers, you call them florets. The ones that are peripherally located are called peripheral ray florets. Each one is a flower. Since it's a tiny flower, we call it a floret. Similar to how we called a tiny flower-like structure leaflet in compound leaf, this is called a floret. Why are we calling it ray floret? Similar to how sun rays are like this, the ray florets also appear similar to sun rays, so you call it the ray floret. What you thought of as the petal of this flower is actually a petal of just this floret. So these are present peripherally. What do we have in the center right here? These are present centrally and you call them disc florets. Each disc floret looks like this. The ray florets are unisexual. They are pistillate in most cases. They don't have androecium. Whereas the ray florets are bisexual. They have both androecium and gynoecium. Since each of these is a tiny flower, it will have its own calyx, its own corolla. If it's bisexual, it has its own androecium and gynoecium. If it is pistillate unisexual, like the ray florets, it will have only the gynoecium, androecium is absent. So each one here is a ray floret. If you can see this closely, I don't know if the focus will be fine or not. I hope it is visible. So all of these petal-like things individually are ray florets. If you look very closely at the center, you have tiny flowers, not very visible in this flower. The right here, I'm not sure if the focus is correct or not. Okay, I will remove all the ray florets and show you just the disc florets. Just give me 1 minute. Again, since the focus of the camera is adjusted to the board, it may not be very clear. but if you have such a flower at home, you can take and have a good look at it. So what are we looking at here? At the center, right here, super tiny things. These are the disc florets. In comparison, a ray floret is this long. Okay, is it visible? This is a ray floret. And here you have one disc floret. The ones that are in the extreme center is the disc floret. This is the size of a ray floret and here is the disc floret. Okay, so that is how they look. Okay, now the flowers here obviously are very small. That's why we call them florets. They don't have a stalk, so they are sessile. They do have bracts that form a involucre, so we say that it's bracteate. And they are epigynous and pentamerous. Okay. Now, let's understand the characters of the flower. We have two types of flowers. Each morphology is different. So you will have different set of characters for ray floret and disc floret, two different floral formulas, two different floral diagrams. Okay. So how is the ray floret? Ray floret is peripheral, position is outside, peripheral it is present, while the disc floret is present centrally. Ray florets in most cases is pistillate, unisexual, it has only gynoecium, no androecium. Very rarely it may not have gynoecium also, in which case we say it is neutral. If it is neutral, what is the point of that flower? It is involved in attracting the pollinators. Okay, so it may be pistillate or neutral, and here it is bisexual. Ray florets are zygomorphic, whereas disc florets are actinomorphic. How are the sepals here? The sepals may range in number from 2 to 3, but what happens here is the sepals will fuse. Okay, how many ever sepals are present in different species? They will fuse and they will get dissected to form super tiny hair-like structures. There is a special name for that. We call it pappus. Okay, so there are many pappus hair present. If you have ever looked at this dandelion or these kind of seeds floating around in the air, all of these hair-like structures that you see are pappus. Generally, what happens when a flower transforms into the fruit, the calyx will disintegrate and fall off. But in some cases, the calyx will persist even in the fruit. For example, if you consider Solanaceae members like chili and brinjal and tomato, you know that it will form a cap-like structure in chili, right? This is what? This is calyx. If it is present even in the fruit, we call it persistent calyx. Over here, this also is present in the fruit. This is actually the fruit. Inside that the seed will be there. So you can see that the calyx is still persistent. Why is it there? The whole reason this is there is to help in the dispersal of the seed. If the wind is carrying it, this pappus will help in carrying it across long distances. So that's the whole purpose of pappus. So we say that the calyx is persistent. What is pappus now? This hair-like structures that form from the calyx is what we call pappus. Now, how is the corolla? Here you have 5 petals, here also you have 5 petals, here also it is fused, here also it is fused. The thing in ray florets is, out of the 5 petals, 3 petals fuse to form a structure called ligule. Ligule means strap-like structure. So if you look at any ray floret, I want you to go home and look at the ray floret. If you look at the ray floret, you will know, this diagram will give a better idea. There are 5 petals. Of the 5 petals, 3 petals will fuse to form this long ligule-like structure. The other 2 petals will be extremely small. Okay, so you can even see demarcations like this, which indicates the point of fusion. Here you can see these 2, and at the tip there will be some sort of incision. Okay, so that is what we call a ligule. Ligule means a strap-like structure. Here you can see the presence of ligule. Where can you see that? You can see that only in ray floret. In disc floret, that long ligule is not present. Here you can see valvate aestivation. In the petals of the disc floret, pretty much the same. You have 5 petals, they are fused, but here a ligule does not form. Instead, it becomes tubular. You can notice here how it has formed a tube-like structure, right? Also, another thing, if you look at the disc florets here, each disc floret resembles the shape of a star, doesn't it? It looks very pretty, star-like. Star means aster. Aster is another term used to denote the star. Since the disc florets here resemble stars, we call this family Asteraceae. Aster means star. Okay, so that's the whole reason why we call it Asteraceae. Here is a section. You can see how this is the stalk of the whole, inflorescence. The peduncle is flat. At the sides, you can see the involucre of bracts. At the peripheral end, you can see the ray florets. At the center, you can see the disc florets, right? So these disc florets resemble tubes. They are tubular and they are star shaped. Okay. Yeah, even here you see valvate aestivation. If you talk about ray florets, in ray florets there is no androecium because they are generally pistillate flowers, so androecium is absent. Here you do have androecium. There is a special feature about androecium in Asteraceae members. So here you have 5 stamens. Generally so far we've seen that the filaments will fuse and the anthers will remain free. But here you see a condition called syngenesious condition where the anthers are united and the filaments are free. Such a condition is called syngenesious condition, and you see that in this particular family. That's a characteristic feature. Also they are epipetalous, meaning they are fused with the petals. Okay, talking about the gynoecium, it's pretty much the same in both. It is bicarpellary and syncarpous unilocular, bicarpellary, syncarpous unilocular. Basal placentation, short style with bifid stigma, basal placentation, short style with bifid stigma. Bifid stigma means the stigma will be like this. It will be like a forked stigma. Okay, so you can see it here. The stigma is bilobed. The style is very short, not very well exposed. Okay, talking about the fruit formed is called cypsela. It looks like this. This is a cypsela. You can see this is the ray floret. The disc floret. This is the fruit that forms. If you break open the fruit wall, you can see inside the seed. I'm sure you must have noticed how they add all of these sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds inside the salads. So the sunflower seed that you eat for good fat and nutrients is obtained from this fruit called cypsela. Okay? Yeah. And this is the dicotyledonous family. So the seeds are dicotyledonous and non-endospermic, or you can also call it ex-albuminous. Talking about its floral formula and floral diagram. Let's talk about ray florets first. Ray florets are zygomorphic. They are generally unisexual, and the calyx is present in the form of a pappus. So I will write K, and in the subscript I will write P, which indicates that it's like pappus. Different books give you different way of writing the floral formula. Sometimes they give 2 to 3 and write P. Basically when they've given 2 to 3, it means that 2 to 3 are there, they have fused and then they've dissected to form hair-like structure. I will just represent it as P. And then you have corolla. Corolla you have 5. They are fused. So you have over here 3 plus 2 that are fused. 3 are large and 1 is small. And then you don't have Androecium. You have gynoecium and syncarpous. And in the disc florets, how is it? Also, yeah, here it is actinomorphic, here it is bisexual, here again calyx is in the form of pappus, here you have corolla, no distinction, 5, Androecium is present, 5 in number, that also shows some fusion, it's also epipetalous, gynoecium, you have 2 carpels that are fused. So that would be the floral formula of Asteraceae. If you look at the floral diagram, here you have the mother axis, here is representation of the bract. Outer calyx, you have many that are fused, here they've shown 3, but it forms pappus. In ray florets, you have corolla, 5 in number, 1, 2, 3 are large and fused, forms the ligule, the other 2 are very small, there is no Androecium at all here. And in the center, you have gynoecium, bicarpellary syncarpous with 1 ovule basal placentation. Here you have bract, calyx is there, forms pappus, corolla is there, no distinction in size, all of them are of the equal size, they are fused, and Androecium is 5 in number. You show syngenesious condition where the Androecium is fused. Also they are epipetalous, this line will represent that, and at the center you have a bicarpellary syncarpous ovule with basal placentation. Okay, Now, let's move on and talk about the economic importance of sunflowers. We have many ornamental plants like sunflower, marigold, chrysanthemum and all of that. Food that we obtain, lettuce, sunflower seeds, all of that is from this family, and then we get many dyes also, like from the marigold flower, yellowish orange color dye is obtained. So these are some economic importance. Now let's move on and learn about the last family in this chapter, which is Poaceae. Poaceae is also called Gramineae. Gramineae is a very economically important plant family, because all of your grains and cereals come from this family. Rice, wheat, jowar, maize, ragi, all of these belong to this family. So regardless of whether you eat roti or rice, we have to thank this family, because that is what is mostly a part of our diet. Okay, so this is also called grass family or wheat family. Distribution worldwide, most of them are herbs. Since this is a monocot family, this is the only monocot family that we are learning about. Okay, the vegetative character, since it's monocot, you will have fibrous root system. Stem is herbaceous. It may be erect or sometimes it's prostrate. You've seen how grasses can form runners, so it's prostrate, and it is cylindrical. Leaves are sessile. You never see stalk in a grass leaf or in a sugarcane leaf, right? Because over there it is sessile, but it forms a sheathing leaf base. Remember, we've learnt about it. So sessile, it can form a sheathing leaf base. Alternate type of phyllotaxy can be seen. They are simple, and since it is a monocot family, it will show parallel venation. Let's talk about the floral characters. The floral characters, here also the inflorescence is a little complicated, so pay attention and listen carefully and understand well. The inflorescence here is called a spike of spikelets, and it's a type of racemose inflorescence. Okay, so here you have the stalk of the inflorescence, which is called the peduncle. This stalk will have branches, and the main axis is called the rachis. You will have further branching from the rachis, which are called the rachilla. Over here, each thing that you're looking at here is a spikelet. You have this whole thing which has many spikelets is called a spike of spikelets. Individually, each one of this is a spikelet. Within each spikelet, you will have many flowers. Many flowers form one spikelet. Many spikelets together form a spike of spikelets. Okay. Now, let's understand the structure of each individual spikelet. Okay. So, what you're looking at here is one spikelet. Within the spikelet, many flowers will be present. One to many flowers will be present. These flowers are also very small, so we call them florets. Unlike most flowers, the flowers in this family are boring, not very brightly colored. The reason is flowers are brightly colored, they have brightly colored petals in order to attract pollinators like insects. Over here, pollination happens by wind. Since wind is abiotic, it doesn't matter if they produce color, fragrance, nectar. So they don't waste their energy on any of that. They don't look very appealing. Okay, so these are very like boring colored flowers. Okay, yeah. So the flowers here do have a pedicel. They will have bracts. Bracts are of so many different types, I'll tell you. So this whole thing is one spikelet. Okay, so this whole thing is one spikelet. This spikelet, the whole spikelet will have two bracts. Okay, this is one bract, this is one bract. These bracts will be unequal in size. Okay, there will be one large bract and one small bract. These two bracts for the whole spikelet are called glumes. The upper glume is larger in size compared to the lower one. This is comparatively smaller in size. Okay, so this whole thing is the spikelet. These two are the bracts for the whole spikelet. Now, the whole spikelet also has bract, and individual florets also have bracts. Okay, so if you look at the floret or the flower, pedicellate, bracteate, they are zygomorphic. Mostly they are bisexual, but in plants like maize, there is a separate male flower and a female flower. So sometimes it can be unisexual as well. They are hypogynous. Okay. Here, the tiny flowers, like I already mentioned, are called florets. They cluster into tiny spikelets. Each one here is a floret. See, 1, 2, 3, 4. They are florets. They cluster together to form a spikelet. So, yeah, the spikelet will have two bracts at the base. We call that the glumes. A lot of terms to remember. So, don't get confused. Glumes are the bracts for the whole spikelet, but each floret also has its own pair of bracts. Okay. Now, let's talk about the structure of each floret. Over here, like in many monocot families, you do not have separate calyx and corolla. You have just one non-accessory whorl, which is called the perianth. Now, the units of the perianth called tepals, there's just two of them and they're very small, very tiny, scaly and not very colorful. We call them laudicules. Over here, you're looking at just one floret. Whatever I'm outlining in pink right now, it's not really pink in the flower. They are called laudicules. They're very small and scale-like. Okay. Here, talking about the Androecium, there will be 3 stamens. Here you have 1, 2 and 3. These 3 stamens are present in a whorl. Sometimes there may be 6. Basically, most monocot families are trimerous flowers. So sometimes there may be 6 stamens also in certain families, but there is no fusion here. So we can say that they are polyandrous. How is the gynoecium? It's very clear that it is a superior ovary. And this gynoecium is monocarpellary unilocular with single ovules. One carpel, one locule, one ovule only. And the stigma here, as you can see, is very feathery. And the anther here is said to be versatile. Versatile means the filament of the anther is attached only at one small point. So the anther lobes can zigzag or, like move like this, like a seesaw. Why is that important? Why should the anther be like this? Why should the stigma be feathery like this? The reason is very simple. These are plants that will get pollinated by wind. If the anther is like that, then liberation of pollen grains will become very easier. If the stigma is very feathery, it can trap the airborne pollen grains very easy. So to help in the process of pollination, the anther is like that, versatile, and the stigma is feathery. Okay. Now, talking about its fruits. The fruit that it produces is called caryopsis. Maize, rice, wheat, ragi, all of them, the fruit is caryopsis. Here you can't clearly differentiate between the fruit and the seed because the seed coat would have fused with the fruit wall. You can't peel out the fruit wall and take out the seed. So here the pericarp, which is the fruit wall, would have fused with the seed coat. Okay, so inside that you have the seed, but you can't really take it off. Okay. Yeah, since this is a monocot plant, like majority of the monocot plants, the seeds here will have endosperm. So they are monocotyledonous and endospermic. This kind of a fruit where the fruit wall is fused with the seed coat is called a caryopsis. Now, let's talk about the floral formula and floral diagram. This has bracts, bracteate, it is zygomorphic. So percentage symbol, it is bisexual in most cases. You don't have a calyx and corolla here, you have perianth, you have 2, but they are very small in scale, like we call them laudicules. Androecium, 3 are present, there is no fusion, so no brackets. Gynoecium, there's only one carpel, unilocular and one ovule, so you just write 1. And since it's a hypogynous flower, the ovary will be superior, you'll draw a line at the bottom of G. Here you can see very clearly, oh yeah, I forgot one thing. I forgot to tell you one thing. Each flower, yeah, I forgot to tell you this. Each individual floret will have 2 bracts again that vary in size. There will be one large bract. Okay, this is for each floret. Okay, glumes are for the entire spikelet. For each floret, there will be 2 bracts. One large and one small. The large bract is called lemma. Okay, so the large bract, okay, is called lemma and the smaller one is called palea. Okay, This is the large one, and over here you have a relatively smaller one. The smaller one is called palea. Sometimes in some species what happens is, from the tip of the bracts, like from the tip of the glumes and from the tip of palea and lemma, you can see these pointed structures arising. Okay? Glumes, lemma and palea, generally they can have spear-like extensions, very pointed extensions that we refer to as awns. Okay, I forgot to mention this earlier. So these are called awns. I repeat, this whole thing is a spikelet. The spikelet within it will have many florets. At the spikelets at the bottom, you will have a pair of bracts that vary in size. The upper bract is larger and the lower bract is smaller. The bract for the whole spikelet are called glumes, upper glume and lower glume. Individually, each floret will also have its own pair of bracts, which is again variable in size. There is one large one, one small one. The large one is called lemma and the small one is called palea. Within that, you will have the other floral parts. So these bracts, glumes, lemma and palea in some species will have these sharp spear-like structures arising from the tip. They are called awns, A-W-N-S. Okay? Yeah. So here what you're looking at is the larger bract, lemma, and this one here is the smaller bract, palea. This is the mother axis. You can see here are the laudicules, two of them very small, highly reduced. What I'm going to draw here in blue, this is one stamen, another stamen and the third stamen. There are 3 stamens present. At the center you have gynoecium, single carpel, single locule, single ovule. What you're seeing here represents the feathery stigma. So this is what a floral diagram of Poaceae looks like. So with that, we have come to the end of this chapter, Morphology of Flowering Plants. It was a lot, there is a lot of examples, there's a lot of things that you have to remember regarding families. A lot of you might have questions, how to remember this, how to memorize it and retain it in your memory for a long time. For the families, I would say make tables where you have characters of all the families in one place. So when you compare and study, that will make your job easier, and this chapter requires very frequent revisions. Otherwise, whatever you've studied, it's very easy to forget because there's a lot of examples to remember. So I hope this session was helpful and all of your doubts in this chapter is cleared. If at all you have any doubts, you can always drop your doubts in the comment section, and as soon as I can, I will clear it for you. So with this, I will sign off from today's session. I'll see you very soon in the next week with the chapter Anatomy of Flowering Plants. Until then, take care of yourselves, study hard and keep learning. Thank you.